Yes, please. Good evening. I'd like to call the Asheville City Council meeting to order for June 25th, 2013. If you can just take a moment to look at your phones to ensure that they're either on, off, vibrate, or silent, so it will not disrupt the proceedings. I sincerely appreciate it. All right, at this time, we're going to stand and recite the Pledge of Allegiance together.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Tonight's invocation will be given by Councilman Hunt.
I found myself this week inspired by service. This room has many people in it who serve this community in different ways, in volunteer roles, in staff roles, and elected roles. One of the staff roles is the staff role that's been filled by Bob Ost the past several years. And as many of you know, this is his last meeting, and we'll have a more special moment for him in a few minutes. But I wanted to offer an invocation that is about service and commitment. It's words of Walt Whitman in his preface to Leaves of Grass. This is what you shall do. Love the earth and sun and the animals. Despise riches. Give alms to everyone that asks. Stand up for the stupid and crazy. Devote your income and your labor to others. Hate tyrants. Argue not concerning God. Have patience and indulgence toward the people. Take off your hat to nothing known or unknown, or to any man or number of men. Go freely with powerful, uneducated persons, and with the young, and with the mothers of families. Read these leaves in the open air every season of every year of your life. Re-examine all you have been told in school or church or in any book. Dismiss whatever insults your own soul, and your very flesh will be a great poem and have the richest fluency, not only in its words, but in the silent lines of its lips and face, and between the lashes of your eyes, and in every motion and every joint of your body.
All right, thank you very much. At this time, I have the honor of providing a resolution of appreciation to Robert W. Ost, Jr. Bob, if you would come forward. And Tracy and Ryan, would you join Bob? I guess I would take a point of personal privilege. I've been on council for 14 years, and I started off as Councilwoman Bellamy, and Bob and I had to spend a lot of time in order for me to serve on council. Bob had to talk to the Department of Housing and Urban Development quite a bit to ensure that I could even serve in a capacity, since I worked with a nonprofit. And it's there that I got to know Bob. And Bob fought for me, and he said the people elected her and she should serve. And we had to do resolutions. Lenny had to sign some things and make it happen, and it endeared me to Bob Ost, because Bob fought for me. As mayor, I get to talk to Bob about legal issues, and Bob shoots it straight. And Bob, over the last 14 years, I have seen you fight for this organization that's unparalleled, unprecedented. Your commitment to being here early in the morning to late at night, missing Ryan's programs. I know that I was sitting at 1, and I know you were working on something that I probably asked you to do, and I appreciate that. Your service here has been a sacrifice to your family, and I want you to know that it's not unnoticed with our organization. While we may fill the position, we can never replace you. Your love for this city, this organization, is unprecedented. I remember when we first got to interview your dad for service on one of our boards. You're just like, I want you to know that is my father, and I'm going to step out as you all talk about this issue because I don't want to have any appearance of preferential treatment. And he served our community so well, so very well, just as you have. And it is an honor to read this proclamation. I know Mayor Sitnick, if she was here earlier, she would stand with me, and Mayor Bissett was here as well. Mayor Martin, who hired you, Mayor Worley, we all think the world of you because you have been the city's staunchest supporter. You have defended this city in good days and in bad days, and you've done it tirelessly. And this proclamation can never fully repay you for the service that you've given our community, your hometown, my hometown. Bob, you have been so wonderful for this organization. And while you're going to pursue a new endeavor, I wish you the best. But you can always come home. Forget what Thomas Wolfe said. You can come home again. And we will definitely miss you, and it's with this pleasure. Council, would you come stand with me? This resolution of appreciation to Robert W. Oates, Jr., resolution number 13-125 reads, whereas Bob Oates has served the citizens of the city of Asheville as city attorney since November the 18th, 1996, and whereas on February 12, 2013, Bob announced his resignation to be effective July 1, 2013, and whereas Bob entered public service in 1983 and worked for the last 25 years exclusively within local governments in North Carolina. And whereas Bob has served many different councils, including 4 different mayors with dedication, loyalty, energy, and professionalism. And whereas Bob has a strong relationship with the UNC School of Government and the North Carolina League of Municipalities, both of which see him as a strong resource for both legal and planning matters. And whereas Bob holds both a law degree and a master's degree in regional planning from UNC Chapel Hill and is a member of the American Institute of Certified Planners. And whereas Bob has a long history of involvement in professional organizations and is a past chair of the Zoning, Planning, and Land Use Law section of the North Carolina Bar Association. And whereas Bob is current president of the North Carolina Municipal Attorneys Association. And whereas Bob has distinguished himself and the city of Asheville by reason of his outstanding service as city attorney. And whereas this city council will miss the high level of professional competence provided to the city council by Bob, and also his integrity, charm, wit, advice, dependability, and friendship. And whereas the city council and prior city councils have had the utmost respect and confidence in Bob. And whereas Bob has also provided outstanding service to the city of Asheville departments, boards, and commissions. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the City Council of the City of Asheville that the members of the Asheville City Council do hereby express their appreciation of and respect for Robert W. Oates, Jr. for the years of outstanding legal service he has rendered to the City of Asheville as City Attorney. It's adopted on June 25th, 2013. It has my signature, all members of council, the city manager, and the city clerk in witness thereof. I would also like to recognize former Mayor Michael Love, and he's also former city manager. I'd like to give you your name tags and a little parting gift. And an opportunity to speak not about a legal issue before City Council.
I can't tell you how much this means to me as I sit upstairs every day every council Tuesday when I'm leaving to come to meetings, I tell my staff I'll see you all tomorrow if I still have a job. And that's just a reminder to me that I serve at your pleasure. But it's been my pleasure to serve you. And there's a lot more I could say, but we have a long meeting, and so I'll just leave it at that. But with a closed session. So I'll just leave it at that. But I will say that Ms. Burleson, I asked her to keep me off the agenda this time. She didn't do it, but she did get me on it. Did get me on it at the beginning instead of the end. So I'm glad to have this opportunity to address it. Thank you. Sure.
At this time, we would like to hear from any member of the community wishing to address council on any item on our printed consent agenda, item A through P. At this time, you can come forward. Several items addressing many issues in our community. All right, seeing no one coming forward. Council, any questions, comments on item A through P on the consent agenda?
I have a question.
Councilman Bothwell.
Concerning the contract for repaving roads, later in the agenda, we're going to be talking about extending our living wage policy, and I'm curious if the contractor that's under consideration for the repaving is a living wage certified contractor, or if we have been assured that the contractor is in fact paying living wage.
Can you just state your name for the record?
Greg Schuler, Streets and Engineering Manager, Public Works. Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of council, I can't say for sure, to be honest. The contract that we'll be talking about for next year, next fiscal year, I'm assuming that policy will be in place at that time. The company is regional, if not a national company, based out of Nashville, Tennessee. They have a local office here, but that was not part of the contract that we put together because that was not part of the existing ordinance.
Right. Thank you for that. It's my concern often, I've expressed it before, when we let contracts, thank you very much, when we let contracts for jobs that are, quote, saving the city money, if we're violating our living wage policy, we're really sort of ducking. We're fudging on our commitment to paying a living wage. So I'll be glad that it is part of next year's, and I understand that it was not part of the policy when this was negotiated. So it's reasonable enough, but I'll be glad going forward that we have that as part of our policy. Thank you.
I will say this, that we did have a review of contracts before based upon the policy that we do have in place, and we did not see any violators. And I think when Ms. Mills come in later on this evening for this part of the agenda, we can talk to her about this because staff has done an assessment, and so I think it would be good for us to put on the record the truth, and so that we won't make accusations and not have it founded on the truth.
Thank you.
Council, any other questions, comments, or a motion?
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further questions or comments? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. The motion carries. Council, we have two updates this evening, one on the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee, and the other is a legislative water update. First, we want to hear from Ms. Simmerly, who's representing the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee. Welcome. And if you just state your name for the record.
My name is Lindsay Simmerly. I'm the chair of the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee. I don't actually know how to make the PowerPoint work, though.
Ms. Burleson will assist you.
Thank you.
And you can bend that microphone wherever it's going to suit you.
A little taller. That's not me. Okay. Cool. Okay. Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of council, thank you for your time tonight. Again, my name is Lindsay Simmerly, and I chair the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee for the city. We were formed as an official committee of the City of Asheville in November of 2011. City Council, for several years at that point, had identified affordable housing as a crisis in the city and therefore sought to formalize that by establishing a full-time committee of the city. Our membership is pretty diverse. We range from people that have a need for affordable housing to neighborhood activists, nonprofit and for-profit developers and landlords, as well as members of the finance community, legal, homelessness, and veterans advocates. Boiled down, our work plan really falls into a couple main areas that go around our charge of providing policy and best practice recommendations to the City of Asheville to increase the supply of affordable housing. Another aspect of that is that we also want to make sure that the housing stock that we do have is safe and accessible to all of Asheville's citizens. Our first overarching goal, and what we've spent the most time on, is increasing the supply of affordable housing in the city. One way that we have sought to do this is made a recommendation to the Housing and Community Development Committee to allocate 1 penny of every $100 city property tax value to the Housing Trust Fund. And the number that y'all actually have in your budget proposal for tonight is really close to that, and we're really grateful. I know that budget times have been tough and really appreciate Council's prioritization of those issues. That 1 penny of every $100 comes from some original intent language around the first time the Housing Trust Fund was proposed in 2000, and at that time it was about $400,000 based on, so that's kind of where the 1 penny came from. The second big area that we've been looking at is allowing for and incentivizing higher density in all of Asheville's neighborhoods. The first piece of that is allowing for it, and so we've been really looking at how do we increase density in all of our neighborhoods throughout the city. One of the areas that we're looking at right now is some potential changes to our accessory apartments ordinance that would allow for potential higher square footage in accessory apartments, whether that's in a finished basement or someone's garage apartment. We've also been looking at city zoning, and we'll potentially be making some recommendations on that, and have looked at and will continue to look at open space development and cottage development to say, how do we allow for more of this? The other side of that is how do we incentivize people to build more dense, affordable housing in the city? One of the areas that we've been looking at and are continuing to is the density and sustainability bonus. It's been around for a couple of years now, and to date, no one has actually used that. It was a policy that came out of council and was a good policy, and some of the feedback that we've heard from the development community is it's really hard to understand. It only applies to very small areas of land, and the Sustainability Advisory Committee for the city also is looking at that to propose some increased changes to that to where it can potentially be used a little bit more to help incentivize some density. Another long-term policy that we have started looking at and are not pursuing for any time in the near future, but will continue to look at, is inclusionary zoning as one potential long-term strategy. It's a strategy that, as it's been used around the country and even a couple cities in North Carolina, has been incredibly effective for increasing the overall supply of affordable housing. It's not something that we're making any moves forward on now because of the current legislative climate, but we'll continue to look at as we move forward. The other piece is increasing housing safety and accessibility for all of the citizens of Asheville. Recently, we passed out of committee to say that the city of Asheville, as a whole, doesn't discriminate against its LGBT citizens. But currently, because of the way state law is, you can be evicted or kicked out of housing just for being gay, lesbian, or bisexual. And so out of our committee, we said, City of Asheville doesn't have that priority. We would like to change it in the city. We sent it to the Housing and Community Development Committee, and they've adopted an amended version of that. So you'll be seeing that in council here soon. The other piece is getting out information to landlords and tenants, to both sides. Primarily here we're talking about small landlords whenever I talk about this, but we want to get out information. And for tenants, we want to let them know, what rights do you have as a tenant? What do you do if there's a problem in your affordable housing, and who do you turn to? That's a complaint that a lot of people have, is they say, well, I've got a leak in my bathroom, but I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I don't know if I'm supposed to go to my landlord or what happens. So it pretty neatly and quickly lines out, here's how you make a complaint. Here's a sample form of that written documentation so you and your landlord both know how this process goes forward. And then if that's not resolved there, it gives you numbers to Asheville Building Safety as well as Pisgah Legal and a couple other legal avenues that you can turn if you have problems. We also want to help our small landlords be better landlords. And so we let them know, how much can you charge in late fees if your tenants aren't paying their rent on time? What do you do if there's damage to the property? And where do you turn if you're having an issue with a tenant and that's not being resolved? So We're finalizing that, and we'll have a distribution plan here in the next few months. Our next steps are really building on some informal work that we've been doing. We've been informally talking a lot with stakeholders across the city, and we're looking to really formalize that process, particularly with one of the main stakeholders of developers. We recognize that our nonprofit developers can't solve this affordable housing crisis alone. They just can't build that many units. There's just not that much subsidy out there. So we're going to really begin formalizing that process of talking to them to hopefully bring back some good data to y'all of why are our developers not proposing more dense affordable housing in the city. We'll also continue conversations with neighborhood activists and the Neighborhood Advisory Committee to where all sides of this are coming at it together, to where neighbors know what they can expect from properties near them, and so we can hopefully move out of what we've been in, which is this building by building fight, and move forward with something where developers, neighbors, and residents know what to expect from the city. And one area and one constituency group that gets left out of this conversation pretty frequently is all the people in the city of Asheville that need affordable housing or that currently live in affordable housing, or people that are not in the city limits because the barriers to them living here, the cost is simply too high. So we're going to continue to make sure that they're a part of this conversation, and them as the biggest stakeholder in this, that their views are taken into account. We'll also continue to review policy and make recommendations as necessary on broad policy over the next several months. I'm happy to take any questions from y'all at this time, and really appreciate your continued focus on affordable housing and recognizing that that's a crisis, and really helping try to solve this issue.
All right, thank you, Ms. Simley. Are there other members of the committee who are here as well? That's what I was looking for.
I don't believe so. I haven't seen any.
Well, thank you for the work of the committee and what you're putting forward. I have a couple of things, but any council members with a question?
I'll have a comment.
Go right ahead.
I'm the liaison to the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee, and have had the opportunity to watch them, go through a learning curve where you learn everything there is to learn around housing policy, and to see every member of this committee take that on with enthusiasm was a really inspiring thing to see. And to work through that, and then to be able to, from each of these various sectors, start to apply their personal knowledge to this body of knowledge that we have around affordable housing, and to do this in the what I think is kind of a measured fashion, in that you've taken your time to make sure you knew what you were talking about before you started bringing recommendations, and the ones that you're bringing are solid. And I know that with Councilman Pelley and Davis on HCD, that the things that you've brought forward to us has sparked a lot of thought, and during our reviews of those policies. And so what you're doing is really furthering that conversation here, and also expanding kind of the way that we're looking at how are we going to be able to solve this problem. So I'm grateful for your service.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can you go back to your last slide? I do want to bring up about the adoption of and amend the Housing Discrimination Ordinance. HUD requires, on the basis of sexual orientation, gender identification, or gender expression, it is a protected class for HUD. So any organization receiving HUD funding, and so it's important as you are putting together the second bullet that you put that in any landlord that receives a Section 8 voucher, that's already a protected class. And I know it's coming before council, I'm not sure when that will be, but just keep in mind the language is already established by HUD, and I think that should be provided in the information, whatever you're putting together. I also would ask, as you were naming the different organizations that you're going to partner with, please consider the Asheville Community Relations Council, because what you're saying or what you're providing is the services that they are also providing. And so I would love to see you all collaborate with them, because of their ability to really get out to the grassroots level, as well as talk to the tenants so they will know their rights. Another group that you should reach out to is CREA. CREA is an organization designed for small landlords who have rental properties that are affordable throughout our community. And they have monthly meetings, and they are willing to have speakers who come in and speak to them about new policies, practices. And so I know that they will be willing to work with you to provide you an opportunity to talk to them about any concerns that you're bringing up and bringing forward.
Sounds great. Thank you for this.
All right. Thank you all for your service.
Thank you.
Next, we're going to have a presentation from Jeff Richardson on the legislative and water updates.
Mayor, members of council, good evening. Thank you so much for the continued opportunity. My name is Jeff Richardson, and I'm going to briefly go through and highlight continued legislative activity in Raleigh that we continue to track, both budgetarily as well as operationally for the city of Asheville and the services that we provide our community. The things that we've continued to track over the last several months, first I'll start with House Bill 488. That's the transfer control of the city's water system to a regional entity. Mayor, council, you're aware that this became law back on May 14th. Our legal department continues to work with outside counsel moving this through the court system. No change since I was here previously. House Bill 252, the same. It's the enactment of the law that would now prohibit the city from moving up to 5% of our utility revenue over to the general fund. That would previously been earmarked for street, sidewalk, and other related infrastructure improvements associated with water line improvements. And this was ratified on June the 5th. House Bill 418, we've referred to that as the CRA. That's the Cultural Recreation Authority. That was the bill that was introduced earlier in the session that would establish a joint city-county parks recreation authority. We continue to track this. As of June the 18th, municipalities in Buncombe County were not going to be invited to join the CRA for up to 2 years. This did go to the Senate Finance Committee today, and we're currently analyzing any changes that occurred today as a result of that. House Bill 224, no change with that. That is requiring the city to relinquish ETJ. We have continued to work cooperatively with Buncombe County over the past several months since this bill was ratified, and will continue to do so. House Bill 568, Asheville de-annexation of the Asheville Regional Airport. I would report no movement on this since it was referred to the Committee on Government on June the 5th. House Bill 708, which was the bill that would prevent cities from transferring money from an enterprise fund to any other funds. Again, that was referred to the Senate Committee on Rules and Operations on May the 2nd, and to our knowledge, there's been no additional movement at this time. We'll talk more this evening about House Bill 998 when we go back to council for the budget discussion, but House Bill 998 is the Tax Simplification and Reduction Act, and the House version is designed to ensure that for the coming budget year that municipalities across the state would not have a revenue loss impact. The Senate version of the bill would impact municipal revenues. We are continuing to track this, and again, we'll talk more about this later this evening. House Bill 94, Senate Bill 112. These are amendments to environmental laws. We've continued to track this activity in Raleigh, and we would report that these bills could, they've been in natural resources since 5/15, and if they move forward, they could impact our ability to work with redevelopment, and we'll continue to track this accordingly. Senate Bill 612, Regulatory Reform Act of 2013, no change since I last came to council. Again, these are this is a bill that would require DENR to develop minimum design criteria for stormwater runoff permits in terms of development on land, and we continue to watch this closely. Pleased to report that House Bill 813, Senate Bill 724, this was previously discussed and reported by the Public Safety Committee earlier this year. This was a bill that was ratified, signed by the governor on June the 12th. This is going to help our local law enforcement officials with synthetic drug activity in our community. Several bills that we continue to track. One is House Bill 937 that would amend various firearm laws, and this was referred to the Committee on Rules, Calendar, and Operations of the House on 6/18. This one would allow concealed carry of firearms in establishments serving alcohol, as well as gatherings and events where admission is charged. We'll continue to watch this because it also could affect public parks, greenways, and vehicles on public property. House Bill 714, Senate Bill 443, the disposition of abandoned firearms. We discussed this yesterday. This bill has gone into law, signed by the governor on 6/19. Chairman Bothwell of the Public Safety Committee, we talked about this yesterday because there had been an interest in a gun buyback program, and this law would forbid law enforcement officers from destroying fully operating firearms. The Asheville Police Department and administration will continue to discuss this, working through public safety, and will report back at a later time. That's a quick overview of the bill activity in Raleigh. Mayor Bellamy and members of council, I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
I just have a quick question. So the financial impacts to the city that we had talked about earlier this year, around March, April, based upon the summation of the bills that you gave tonight, the only impact is one or two. How many bills actually came out that had a financial impact on the city?
House Bill, the first I would mention is House Bill 252, which is the 5% transfer from the water fund over to the general fund that we would use for capital infrastructure improvements. We're holding on House Bill 998, which is tax reform. If it stays on the House side, it does not have an immediate impact in fiscal year 14. It does have an out-year effect, and I'll talk about that later in the budget presentation, that the current House version would affect general fund revenues after next year. And there is continued negotiation going on between the House and the Senate on that. Loss of ETJ was approximately $220,000.
That was it?
Yes, ma'am, I believe so.
Okay.
I'll correct myself during the budget presentation. I'll take another look at that with your permission. And when we go into the budget presentation, I'll be prepared to address that to make sure I've not missed anything.
Okay, and I just had a question about 252, about the 5%, because the only year that we did more than $145,000 was this fiscal year for
Azalea Road, Lake
Azalea
Craig.
Road. But other than that, we had not been using the 5% to the full extent of our abilities.
Yes, ma'am, you're exactly correct.
Okay.
We were looking in the RAD tip for the river area riverway development plan. There is a need for water infrastructure attention in that area, and so that transfer money would have qualified for that project.
But to date?
You're correct.
Okay, thank you so very much. Just want to be correct. All right, thank you, Council. Those are the only updates that we had. So we're going to move over to our public hearings. Public hearing A is a continuation of a public hearing to consider the permanently closing of an unopened right-of-way between Tarpon and Craigie Avenues. And Mr. Foster is going to make the presentation. It's my understanding there's no new information.
Good evening, Mayor Bellamy, members of council. This is a continuation of a hearing that we started at last meeting, and there is some additional information in that a couple of the things that council had asked for specifically was the gauge the opinion of the adjacent neighbors, and that's occurred. And the adjacent neighbors are neither here nor there on the easement. There is an impact on the specific requester owns this parcel here, that they want to do some setback requirements to include some solar elements in their future house design. And then the second change is that we did met with the traffic engineer on site, and the topography, there's a ravine that runs through here, right where the sewer line is. It's really steep, and there's not enough right-of-way to adequately build a compliant pedestrian facility. It would have to meander back and forth. So in his opinion, it would be impossible at the existing right-of-way or easement to maintain a pedestrian facility through there.
Okay, that's good. Good to know. All right, so we're going to open a public hearing to public comment on the new information that has been provided this evening. Any members of the public wishing to address council on this particular issue? Yes, ma'am, if you would come forward and state your name for the record. And you will have 3 minutes to address council. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm Karen Hanna, and we own the lot that Mr. Foster pointed out right here. And given the new information, then it seems to support our intention to, basically our request to close it without the easement, since it's an unviable option. And so that's what I want to say. Thank you.
Well, that was easy. Thank you. Any other members of the community wishing to address council on this issue? Council, any questions, comments, or a motion?
Thank you for returning, and apologies for having to go through that exercise, and happy birthday to your daughter.
So is that a motion?
And a motion to, yes, to approve.
Second.
The motion has been made and second. Any further questions or comments? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. The motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Next, we have item B, the public hearing to rezone 42 Old Country Home Road from Highway Business District to RM8 Residential Multifamily Medium Density District. Blake Esselton will make the presentation. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. The property in question is off of New Leicester Highway near the Salvation Army store. There's a business park over on the east side with some manufacturing uses. You can see just down here at the lower right-hand corner of the map the railroad tracks. This is Smith Mill Creek running on the west side. And you can see the blue line here, the distinction between the residential zoning, and we've got highway business zoning and commercial industrial here. There is a distinct edge here between kind of commercial uses and residential uses. The property is 1.3 acres, currently vacant. There's also a significant flood hazard area in this area. Most of the property is either in the 100-year or 500-year floodplain. The applicant is seeking a downzoning from highway business to RM8. And the staff report provides more detail on this, but in a nutshell, the applicant is looking for a configuration, a specific configuration that would be allowed in RM8 that would not be allowed in HB, even though HB does allow for single-family and multifamily zoning. Do keep in mind, however, the applicant's interest is in building single-family homes, but this rezoning would be for all the uses that RM8 allows. It is a downzoning, which would mean a loss of potential for mixed use, but staff feels that the location is not that well suited for higher intensity uses. Staff feels it's appropriate for the location to be a multifamily residential zoning, in fact, more so than highway business. It is a small area that would be getting its own zoning district, so the concern of spot zoning was raised, but since it is a downzoning to a lower intensity, and since the RM8 zoning is substantially similar to the RM6 zoning immediately adjacent, staff does not feel that this is likely to be challenged as spot zoning. Planning and Zoning Commission voted on June 5th unanimously to recommend approval of the rezoning. We've had 2 calls from citizens just seeking more information. One of them actually spoke in favor at the Planning and Zoning Commission. Staff feels that the RM8 represents an appropriate transition between the RM6 and highway business zoning and is recommending approval. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much. We'll open a public hearing at this time to public comment. Any member of the community wishing to address council on this particular rezoning? All right, we will close. Yes, you have to come to the microphone. And then if you will state your name for the record. Thank you very much.
Good evening. I'm Mike Ledford. I'm the applicant, and I just wanted to make myself available if you had any questions or any concerns.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Ledford. We appreciate that. We will close the public comment section of the public hearing. Council, any questions, comments, or a motion?
Mayor.
Councilman Hunt, then Councilman Pelley.
I move to approve the zoning map amendment from HB to RM8 as standard rezoning and find that the request is reasonable and consistent with the comprehensive plan and other adopted plans based on information provided in the staff report and as stated in the staff recommendation.
All right. We have a motion and a second. Any further comments or questions from council? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. The motion carries unanimously. Thanks, council. Item C is public hearing to consider amending Chapter 7 of the Code of Ordinances to provide minor adjustments to the mobile food vending ordinance and to remove limitations on the number of permits allowed to operate in the downtown central business district area. Alan Glines will address this issue.
Thank you, Mayor. Members of City Council, members of the public. The original mobile food vending ordinance was adopted in 2011. In the downtown area, there was a limit of 10 trucks that was put in place with the ordinance, so there was a total number of trucks in downtown would be limited to 10. At the end of 2012, we had 9 trucks in the downtown area. They all renewed. That left one vacancy come January, and very quickly that was applied for and approved for the downtown area. After that point, the 11th truck, if you will, or another applicant came to the Downtown Commission and asked for the limitation to be lifted. So we study that issue and a few other comments and questions about the ordinance, and we bring that to you today. In summary, though, this change, if approved, would open up the number of permits allowed for downtown area, remove that language that limits the truck permits to 10, but maintain that limit of 2 in Biltmore Village. We just approved that in January, and there's been no request or changes for that. Also, there's in the current ordinance, there's a specific language that denies dining facilities at a mobile food site, and we're just going to change that language to take it out of this ordinance and let it be addressed through the North Carolina Building Code. We feel like that's a more appropriate location for that kind of compliance. So that would change that to some sites might be able to provide dining areas provided they can meet requirements of the building code, and then just maintain a provision to keep sort of temporary facilities such as porta-johns or just pop-up tents, that sort of thing, out of mobile food sites. So that basically is the nature of the changes today.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Glines. Any member of the community wishing to address council, you can do so now. We'll open the public hearing. Seeing no one coming forward, we'll close the public hearing to public comment. Any further questions or comments from council? Then can I have a motion? A motion to approve or disapprove?
Motion to approve, Mayor.
Second.
Any further comments or questions? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. The motion carries. All right, item D, the public hearing to consider amending Chapter 7 of the Code of Ordinances regarding clarifications to and modifications of the current sign regulations. Judy Daniels.
Sorry, I got my papers turned around. I had it right in front of me. Okay. It's nice to see you, Madam Mayor and members of the council.
That was the nicest thing we've heard. Thank you very much.
These are some in the nature of housekeeping amendments to the sign code, which we do from time to time. They accumulate, and we need to change them. They will allow more flexibility for businesses without allowing an undue additional amount of signage. So we feel like they will be helpful for the community. Just briefly to go over them, the first one relates to, we have a use category called signage for manufactured housing communities. Currently, their signage standards are in a separate section for that use. We also have a sign code which regulates multifamily residential communities, which is what this is. So we felt that just consolidating that in the multifamily communities would make more sense. Over time, as you have these separated, it can lend itself to where you make a change here and then you don't know that it's over there. So that's the recommendation for that, just to consolidate it. The next one relates to, from time to time we have a situation where a business has been somewhere for a while and they've had a sign with a structure for the sign, and a new business comes in and it wants a different types of sign, and it just wants a sign on the building. And then, so that building doesn't realize they're supposed to take down that previous structure, and it just sits there sort of rusting for a long time. This will make it easier for us to enforce upon them that before you get started putting up a new sign, let's just get that old sign taken down. We have several of these sitting around the city, so I think that'll be helpful. The third one you have had experience with before. It has become common practice to have more than one menu board at a fast food restaurant. And so this will encapsulate that which has been allowed multiple times by the Board of Adjustment. I would ask, is this on? I need you to approve it with one little word change in that we had a typo in the report. So it would be, if a menu board is used, one menu board with one face is allowed per drive lane.
So take out the R and put the is back?
Yes, ma'am. Put the one back, not the two.
Okay.
Okay. So that's what that one is about. The next one is called second-tier signs. These are in the nature of directional signs. You have your main entry sign, you have a secondary entry. This lets you have a smaller sign. Some few places in town, their secondary entry, they don't have road frontage on a public road. They're off a private road. So we have a provision to allow you to share space on a sign with an adjoining property that does have frontage on the public road, but in some instances, that property doesn't have a sign, but they're willing to let the person who has the interior property have a sign on that property. This expands that second tier to let them, with the permission of the property owner, have a second tier sign on the adjacent properties, on the adjacent property. Okay, that's that one. And then the last one relates to sign amortization. It has come... Since I have been here, at least, I've noticed a lot of businesses feel very constrained by the 5-year amortization that we have here. This really came to light a year or so ago when a substantially large property was annexed not too long after it had been completed and put up a rather large sign. 5 years is not really enough time to easily amortize something of that size. We checked around other places. More than 5 years for amortization is not unusual. And then we felt that it might be helpful to also include something that relates to how recently, since the property was, the sign was erected, it was annexed. So this is a proposal to expand that amortization to 7 years, but if you were annexed within 3 years before the annexation, that would really become 10 years. You get some extra time with it. So that's proposed on the changes to the signage. The Planning and Zoning Commission considered these and some additional sign changes, but they asked us to do some additional research on the rest of those, and we'll come back to you with those later. But they did recommend approval of these, and we felt we would bring them forward in case you might want to act on them.
Okay, thank you very much. Council will open the public hearing to public comment at this time. Any member of the community wishing to address council on any of the proposed amendments can do so at this time. Okay, we'll close the public hearing to public comment. Council, any questions, comments, or a motion?
Move approval.
Thank you. Is there a second? Any further questions or comments? All right. All right. Any further questions or comments? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. The motion carries. Council, we only have one more public hearing. It's the public hearing to consider an amendment to Chapter 7 of the Code of Ordinances regarding clarifications to and modifications of regulatory standards for industrial uses. Ms. Daniel will also make this presentation.
Hello again. Glad to be with you with this. We've had some recent industrial activity coming in the city, which is a very good thing, and it gave us opportunity to consider our ordinances and look at them more closely because we're using them again, which is good. We're glad to hear that. And one thing we found that we have some confusing language in our processes, the language for review of industrial uses. So in looking at that and just considering the regulations in general, we determined it would be helpful to reconsider some of those. What is before you tonight are processes for the review of Level 2 and Level 3 industrial uses. We also had proposed to the Planning Commission some changes to the open space requirements, but they asked for some additional research on that, so that will not be before you tonight. We'll come back with it. What these will do, first of all, will resolve the confusing language that sort of leaves you out there not knowing what you're supposed to do and open to differing interpretations, which we don't want to see. So what we have recommended is on the Level 3 reviews, where there is no clear language now, we would propose very large industrial projects, those over 100,000 square feet, would be a Level 3 review by the council in the commercial, industrial, and river districts. We're not proposing this for the industrial district projects because that is a district for industrial projects. And there's really no need for it to, it's what it's for being used the way it should. And we have very little industrial zoned property anyway. The commercial, industrial, and river district, however, do have multiple uses in them and may be next to other uses where careful consideration might be something you might wish. So that's what we're proposing. If it's over 100,000 square feet, that it would be a level 3 review by the council in the river and commercial industrial districts. For the level 2 review, what we're proposing that would be the final approval step for the industrial zone for anything over 100,000 square feet, and then in the commercial, industrial, and river districts, projects of 50,000 to 100,000 square feet would be a level 2 review. Anything below those thresholds would be a level 1 review. The Planning Commission considered these, as I said, and deferred the open space, but did recommend approval of these changes to the processes at this time. We believe these would allow us to bring our ordinance up to date. It eliminates confusing language, and it aligns our industrial review thresholds with what we believe are council-adopted priorities in appropriately zoned areas.
Thank you very much. Council will open it up the public hearing for public comment. Any member of the community wishing to address council on this particular issue? All right, we'll close the public hearing to public comment. Council, any questions, comments, or a motion?
Move approval.
Councilman Hunt.
Second.
Councilman Davis, thank you so very much. Council, any further comments or questions? Ms. Daniel, I have one. It's not specifically in this portion, but it applies. Can we look at our parking standards as it relates to industrial uses and overall parking standards? Because in a lot of areas, we still have some of the same parking requirements that we had in the 1980s, 1990s, and our parking standards have changed. As we're trying to be a multimodal city, we're seeing some of that actually play out in areas that have transit services. So it may be, it's not top on your priority list, but if we could put it on the priority list to look at the parking, I think we'll see that some employers would appreciate when they redevelop, not having to add so much asphalt, and that may save them some money, and that may help with our green spaces issues as well.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Council, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. The motion carries. Okay, I noticed on that one, I did that, and I didn't ask for nods. Council, is it okay for staff to look at that issue?
Oh, please.
Got four nods. Thank you. All right, Council, those are all the public hearings. Now we're going to move into unfinished business. Over the last few months, we've been grappling with our annual operating budget. And this is we've had the public hearing. We've heard from the community as it relates to our budget. So now we're going to hear from Mr. Richardson, who's going to follow up on Councilman Hunt's recommendation to bring back some changes or modifications to the printed document that has been published. So, Councilman Hunt, some of your responses and some other stuff. So, Mr. Richardson, have at it.
Mayor Bellamy, members of council, my name is Jeff Richardson, and it's certainly a privilege to be here this evening. I, along with Kathy Ball, we will be walking the council through the current recommended budget from staff. It is our goal to move through operating and capital budgets in an easy-to-follow manner. We want to answer any questions that you may have, and I'll start the evening off by doing a presentation outline. Over the past months, staff and council have worked vigorously to try to identify balancing strategies given uncertainties at the legislative level. Tonight, what we intend to do is we intend to talk about revaluation and what that means for the city of Asheville in terms of its tax rate. We'd like to go back and talk about our operating budget. And as you note, we have zero beside operating budget because we would present to you tonight a balanced operating budget without contemplation of a tax rate increase, as we have previously discussed. Next, I'll turn it over to Ms. Ball, and she will focus on consideration of a 1 cent tax increase that would be dedicated for capital improvement program with a focus on infrastructure maintenance. Also, Ms. Ball will talk about a dedicated 2 cent tax increase for council to consider. That would be earmarked for economic development capital improvement program. This slide is intended to remind City Council of the hard work that you did beginning March the 11th. Annually, City Council goes away and visits with staff and the community on its strategic core focus areas, along with updates, short-term and long-term goal identification, trying to identify where council will spend its resources for the next 1 to 5 year time frame. At our March 11th one-day retreat, City Council identified 4 core focus areas: affordable housing, fiscal responsibility, job growth, community development, and multimodal transportation, along with several long-term goals that accompanied this, focused under the principles of sustainability underpinning these core focus areas with, if you will, a triple bottom line effect: a focus on economic vitality, environmental stewardship, and community development. This slide is not intended to present an overview of everything that you talked about at your retreat. However, there was a strong emphasis on a strategy, a dedicated strategy over the coming years to grow the tax base with several focus areas. This discussion was also teed up with an introduction of the 2013 update of the 2010 Crossroads paper. This update identifies that we continue to have structural challenges that Asheville faces on a daily basis. Our natural growth of our property tax base by itself will not meet the long-term demand of the city's infrastructure needs. That continues to be a challenge. It's documented in the 2013 Community Crossroads, and that introduction of that update led and helped to guide the discussion during that day. This slide is intended to put before the council how the changing landscape has affected the operational budget. Earlier tonight, Mayor Bellamy asked what legislation has been passed in Raleigh that would have a financial effect on the city's budget. This graph represents that in January, the city was looking at about a $2 million structural gap with its operating budget. From January, February into later March, we saw the projected operational gap grow significantly from $2 million to well over $5 million. At that time, we were looking at the contemplation of the loss of the water system, which annually commits $1.9 million to the general fund for the support services that we provide that enterprise. We also were looking at the loss of our ETJ, which, as I said earlier, is $220,000. There was also a one-time bill on unemployment taxes that is about $265,000. And also, the City of Asheville put a $1 million placeholder on tax reform. We identified the need to take $1 million out of operations, set it aside, not really knowing how tax reform would work its way through the General Assembly and what effect it would have on municipalities. Later in April, the Cultural and Recreation Authority was introduced. There was an opportunity for Asheville to consider potentially joining that. That also, if that were to go through, that could have an effect on the general fund, on the operating fund. And so, as you can see, the red line has moved quite a bit from January through June. Where we stand today is that the current operational budget includes no recommended tax rate increase for the general fund operations. We currently have a fund balance of $13.6 million, or 16.2%. No appropriation is contemplated for general fund operations. We also have earmarked a 3% cost of living adjustment, along with no increase, no real change in health care costs for employees. We've had a good year with our health fund, and our employees and our human resources staff should be commended for the hard work to manage that fund. As I reported earlier, we have no CRA, no Cultural Recreation Authority, and I would emphasize that over the coming year that staff intends to continue to look at our regional amenities, to examine our subsidy, our general fund subsidy for these amenities, and our hope is to continue to work collaboratively in our community to lower that subsidy. We also have restructured special events, and as council is aware, staff recommended that this would be the last year for Bell's Share as we know it today. We also have, for our water plan, we have cost savings and deferred capital. What I would say there is that in this current budget year and into next budget year, the staff has identified $2 million that we've set aside to contemplate that we'll continue to work through the legal issues with our water fund, not really knowing as we get deep into the next budget year how that may work out. And finally, House Bill 998 we're assuming that the current House tax reform bill would pass through the General Assembly. What that means to the City of Asheville, Mayor and Council, is that in our next budget year, we would not experience additional loss of revenue. This slide is intended to overview the fiscal impact of the ratified legislation on Asheville revenue. So, Mayor and Council, to summarize, we've got about $220,000 with the loss of ETJ. House Bill 252 would allow us, Council, to transfer over about $1.7 million annually. And then as I just discussed, we've got the pending water system transfer, and that system transfers $1.9 million to the general fund every year. That's the reason that we're holding the $2 million into next budget year, not knowing what the outcome of that litigation is going to be. I will stop there and ask council if you've got questions regarding the current operating budget, any questions that I might be able to answer. I also have Tony McDowell, our budget manager, who is here if you've got questions about the operating side of the budget. If there are no questions, then I'd like to turn it over to Kathy Ball at this time, who will talk about the capital improvement program.
Before we get into the details of what would be proposed with the first slide that you provided, what percentage does that represent? Is that a 7% increase? The very first slide you gave, the one that Kathy's going to go into the more details about, but your very first slide that you put forward.
I'm sorry, Mayor.
That one, if we were to do all those.
Okay, so if you contemplate a 3-cent tax rate increase, along with moving the 1 cent to revenue neutral, we're currently at 42 cents. Revenue neutral would take us to 43, and the contemplation of 1 cent plus 2 cent for economic development would be to 46 cents.
Right, but what percentage would that be of an increase?
7%.
Is it 7?
Yep.
Tony, it is 7?
7%, yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. If there are no further questions, then I'll turn it over to Ms. Ball, and she'll move over into the 5-year capital improvement plan. Thank you.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, and members of City Council, I appreciate the opportunity to come before you tonight and to talk a little bit about what could be the future of Asheville and staff's recommendation to council based upon the retreat that we had in March of this year. I hope that you'll bear with me, as I believe this is a critical place for council, and hopefully a place where we can make some decisions that can help influence the way Asheville looks in the future. So as Mr. Richardson mentioned, he's talked about the operating budget and how we have worked hard to be able to bring that in, even given some of the unknowns, so that we're not recommending a tax increase based upon that. But we would like to talk about the capital improvement budget. And there's two different facets to the capital improvement budget that we'd like to talk about. The first one is our maintenance responsibility. In talking about, this mainly refers to taking care of what we have, maintaining the infrastructure that we have, and meeting the core obligation that the city is responsible for. The second part we'd like to talk about, and this was discussed at the council's retreat, is being able to build on an economic development capital improvement program that will balance our need for money for infrastructure with our need to reinvest in our community in order to get infill development and to get an increase in the amount of the tax base that we receive. And I'm hoping that at the end of the presentation I've been able to paint for you examples of ways that this community has done this in the past and how successful they have been, as well as opportunities in the future. So as we start this, I think that the number one thing that faces our community is the condition of our roadway. That our roadway system currently is at a 65-year replacement cycle. What that means is that each road is replaced on the average of every 65 years. That is not a standard that is recommended or is even really acceptable in the world of street resurfacing and repair. Typically, a street lasts for 20 years, and then it needs some type of maintenance work done on it. So I'd like to talk about that. I'd also like to point out that House Bill 418 it has excluded the opportunity for us to be able to use some of those resources as we had hoped when we presented the budget 2 weeks ago. And then House Bill 252, I think the mayor referred to this earlier, that bill would not allow us to use any money from the water revenues in order to do transformational regional capital projects. So just touching on that issue first, as is mentioned and discussed earlier tonight, the city was able to use money from those what we call 5% Sullivan Act money in order to fund this transformational Azalea Road Lake Craig project. This is at the soccer complex and addresses some major water line, the lack of water line, as well as infrastructure improvements that are highly needed in that area that are safety concerns. Again, we were able to use those in past years and are thankful to our General Assembly for allowing us to be able to continue to use those with revisions to the House Bill 252. We have another project that would definitely qualify. I think Mr. Richardson mentioned this earlier. What we're calling is the River Arch Transportation Improvement Project. That project has a lot of waterline work that would be a very good candidate for use of these funds in the future. With House Bill 252, that's no longer a possibility. So we go back and we look at what tools do we have available within our toolbox and what do we have control over. So that's what I'd like to talk to you about, with the importance being on what do we have the ability to do ourselves to take control of our destiny, and how can we be less reliant on outside forces in order to make Asheville successful and make it the kind of community our citizens want. I've shown you the roads that are located on here, but these could be practically anywhere in the city. This happens to be West Avon Parkway at Merriman. We have examples Vermont Avenue, examples of Broad Street, examples of Shiloh Road, and other examples. And I could continue to put these examples that our citizens are well aware of in terms of the maintenance needs on our roadway and infrastructure. They continue to become even worse. The difficult winters that we had in 2009 and 2010, we applied a lot of sand and salt material to the roadways, which caused the roads to deteriorate at even a higher rate than normal. With an additional 1 cent for maintenance, the highest priority is to place an additional $800,000 into our roadway resurfacing program. And while this doesn't bring us to the 20-year cycle that would be ideal, it does bring us, it cuts in half a 65-year cycle to a 35-year cycle, which is significant and which the city has not seen in the past 20 years. The other item that I wanted to mention within the CIP maintenance budget is downtown sidewalk cleaning. Unfortunately, we didn't have to travel far to get this picture. You see cigarette butts, you see stains, you see spit marks, and we feel it is vitally important for folks to have a good experience downtown to improve the cleanliness of our downtown sidewalks. So there is an item in there for us to contract out sidewalk cleaning within that 1% budget. And I'm not covering every item within there. I'm trying to give you some highlights and a picture of what these improvements could do for the city of Asheville. So just some highlights within there that I've mentioned. I'd also say within that budget includes traffic calming, sidewalk maintenance, bus replacement, as well as new sidewalks, with the largest portion of the new sidewalks being on Hendersonville Road and Lester Highway. So now, as I mentioned before, we're proposing 1 cent for maintenance. And what that does for us above and beyond what we would call the rollover CIP, or no increase, would be that we would be able to add an additional $5.5 million over the next 5 years to that maintenance budget. Now, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about what we call the Economic Development Capital Improvement Program. We're suggesting an increase of an additional 2 cents for the purpose of reinvesting in our community so that we can be financially responsible with our money, and then be able to take some of those funds that come from that and balance that with reinvesting and putting a large portion of that back into our maintenance. So again, we want to control our own destiny. We don't want to be reliant upon outside forces. We want to increase our tax base, infill development, and continue with our sustainability initiatives that we have been so successful with. And congratulations to the mayor. We received a national award this week, the Mayor's Award on Sustainability, which was just a huge success. And thank you, Mayor. I'm going to show you some pictures because we feel like it's important not just to talk about what could happen, but what has happened and what we know has been successful. This is a picture of College Street prior to a complete streets revision on it. This is, as you can see, there's development that's occurred, but it is not what we would consider a great deal of infill development. This is a picture of what it looks like right now. I do want to point out that in the March 11th session, in addition to having these 4 focus areas that Council had, which was job growth, financial responsibility, multimodal transportation, and job growth, or affordable housing and job growth. We also focused on 4 strategic ways of achieving economic development success. And those were downtown vitality, multi-use neighborhoods, job growth, and a vibrant riverfront. So I've kind of focused in on different projects within those areas to show you strategies that we feel like will be successful. So in this slide, what you see is, in addition to the vehicular use, you also see the ability for bicycles, for pedestrian crossing, and as a result of this, it's kind of hard to see, there has been a significant amount of infill development that has occurred. In addition to the discussion of a mixed-use development that would occur on the old Tripp site. So I think that this is an example proven of success, that if we use this type of strategy at other locations, that we would be able to achieve the same level of success. This is South Cox Avenue looking south. And what I would ask you to do is take a look at this and see that while there are sidewalks and bike lanes, this street has an opportunity to be transformed, much like College, to be able to provide for multi-use, a complete street, wide sidewalks, so that we could, on the south slope area, be able to experience that same level of infill development and growth that could occur. This also happens to be a street that we've been in conversation with Duke Power, Progress Energy, and they've agreed to partner with the city in undergrounding the utilities, all the utilities in that area, which would be a huge success in us being able to put this project together. Again, the downtown vitality includes undergrounding utilities, multimodal improvements. It also includes some funding for the upgrade and renovations to the Thomas Wolfe Auditorium, and the money there would be hopefully used as a match or seed funds for other money that the city could get, the Asheville Art Museum renovations, as well as recycling and trash containers in downtown, as well as Biltmore Village and Haywood Road. The next strategy that we've discussed is mixed-use neighborhoods. We know, based upon our history as well as around the country, that mixed-use neighborhoods are good for communities. They help decrease the amount of travel time that people have to walk or ride, and they make businesses accessible in a very easy and convenient way. A mixed-use neighborhood example, this is Eagle Market Street. This is the proposal that has been put forward by Mountain Housing Opportunities that would provide for mixed affordable housing as well as the opportunity to have commercial space within it as well. I think this reflects, again, what the community is hoping to see in terms of reuse of properties that are in need of repair and revitalization. This budget item particularly includes affordable housing, workforce housing, multimodal improvements, the Aston Park Greenway, a gateway that I'll talk about in just a second, as well as Greenway development. This is a shot of the Clingman Avenue traffic circle looking at the from the Riverlink Bridge. And I want to point out that I realize that the audience watching this may not particularly be in favor of roundabouts or bike lanes or sidewalks or whatever is important. The bottom line for us is that we are financially stable and responsible with our funding. This is an example of an improvement that the city did along with Mountain Housing Opportunity probably 5 or 6 years ago with some assistance from grant funds. And it ties back to job growth, because one of the comments that New Belgium made when they came and looked at this area was that they saw that by this type of infrastructure, it represented and reflected their goals and what was important to them, and was another solidifying factor in them moving several or creating several jobs here in Asheville, as well as investing $175 million. So now I take you to the possibility of what could happen. This is the intersection of Clingman and Hilliard. And on the right side, the city has property that's currently used for the park maintenance garage or facilities. It's adjacent on one side to the Aston Park Tennis Center, and on the other side, it's adjacent to Merritt Park, which has been a huge successful affordable housing project in our community. So what I would say is the opportunity of this area to be transformed in such a way as to provide for additional affordable housing, additional mixed income, plus just the intersection itself be upgraded to create a gateway effect into the north or the southwest part of the central business district is a great opportunity. And while our community, this is a picture of the Jeff Bowen Bridge, and while I would acknowledge again that our community may not agree on the best alignment or the best direction, I think that what is a factual statement is to say that the roadway as it currently is a huge drain on our public safety dollars. We experience at least one wreck a day there, some of which contain hazardous materials. It's definitely not friendly in terms of being able to bring in jobs and industry that would require large trucks. So, and we have also know that at the state level, there's been an initiative to move this project forward. And we also, again, know that the ability to be able to do that is to have community buy-in and community investment. So what you will see in this budget is in out years funding to help with aesthetics, to help with some multimodal improvements that help make this project fit in better with the community regardless of the alignment that's chosen. So in no way is this recommendation reflecting a particular alignment, but yet trying to move the project forward. So in job growth, we have the I-26 partnership, the RADTIP project, the Aston Park Gateway, the Art Museum, and multimodal. You'll see some of these repeated because some of these accomplish many of the objectives. And a vibrant riverfront. This is the last strategy that was developed, the fourth strategy that was developed. This is an example of a very successful project that was done by Mountain Housing Opportunities for affordable housing on the riverfront. We've done several years of planning, and I would emphasize that too. I mean, I think one of the things that we have discussed and maybe at times been frustrated about is the number of master plans that we have done and completed. This is an opportunity for us to start in the implementation of those master plans and to have the funding to be able to do that. I mentioned, while I've shown examples of projects that may or may not appeal to certain members and citizens in our community, the biggest investment that we will be making is in our community as a whole in terms of return on investment. So what we're saying here is if we take the dollars that are requested, put them back in the manner that we've talked about, we should be able to see properties develop and redevelop so that the tax value of those properties increase. We've done a sample of 8 different pieces of property on the river that we felt like we had a good handle on in terms of their opportunity for redevelopment. And in looking at those at the current tax value and then what the potential tax value could be based upon having a complete street, a sense of place along the river, what we see bottom line is that we could realize a 2,000% growth in our tax base. And I'll say that again because that's very significant, a 2,000% growth in our tax base. And I will also refer back in a historic way to say that many of our community leaders in the 1980s put forth the investment to build parking garages in downtown at a time that there wasn't a lot of need for them. And in looking back at that historical information, there was over a 3,000% increase in property rates as a result of those investments. And I point that out again to say we're not trudging on a road of something that's never been done here before or something that isn't important. We're trying to strategically put it into a package that makes sense so that we can then see that investment pay off. And again, that 3,000% increase that was experienced in downtown, and it's probably, that evaluation was done in 2007 by Joe Minicozzi. This is even more conservative, but again, still shows 2,000% growth. The vibrant riverfront, of course, we've talked about, and much of our community knows about the Rad Tip project, but that would also be included in our vibrant riverfront. So in summary on this slide, we're talking about property acquisition, again, multimodal improvements, development of the ice plant, Rad Tip, I-26 partnerships, as well as other projects. At this point in time, I'll turn it back over to Mr. Richardson to provide a summary of the presentation.
Mayor Bellamy, members of council, I'll quickly wrap up. And this slide is intended to show the 10-year property tax rate trend for the city of Asheville. If you'll look notably in 2007, the last time that this community went through reevaluation, the city of Asheville and the city council adjusted your tax rate from 53 cents down to 42.38 cents, which represented revenue neutral. If we go back and look all the way back to 2003, the 10-year property tax rate trend suggests that the city of Asheville has not raised taxes in 10 years. In fact, over the last 10 years, let me back up one second. Before I say that, let me point out that the impact of 1 cent moving us to revenue neutral, along with the contemplated 3-cent tax increase on the Asheville property owner. We've got 3 tiers of property values with the city of Asheville: a $150,000 home, $250,000, $350,000. Let's look at the middle tier at $250,000. The annual increase with a 3-cent dedicated tax increase for capital improvement would represent $100 a year in increased property taxes to the city of Asheville. The slide that I was referring to and that I was going to move to just a second ago is the financial trend analysis. What this shows is from 2001 until 2013, over about a 12-year period, that the city's overall general fund spending has remained below inflation when taking into consideration population growth. If you look in 2001, per capita, we were spending $898 per capita on a yearly basis out of the general fund. In 2013, contemplating a 3-cent tax rate increase for dedicated capital, that woven into our current general fund budget adjusted for inflation, would suggest that our per capita spending is at $876, comparatively speaking. Over the last 12 years, our population has increased approximately 18%, the budget at 21%, and the percent change on per capita spending is at a negative 2.45 cent. It suggests that we have continued to work within the resources that we have, modestly going through our day, looking for re-engineering opportunities, asking our staff to do more with less, and that this dedicated 3-cent tax rate increase for infrastructure would be dedicated for not only our current capital maintenance needs, but it would identify our underperforming tax base in key areas of the city. And our goal would be over time to grow our tax base to where our tax base growth on a yearly basis would begin to outpace our expenditure increases that occur on an annual basis. This is the slide I started with. It represents fiscal responsibility moving to revenue neutral, 0% tax increase for our operating budget, given the changes that have occurred and what we've reported to you, and then contemplation for City Council aligned back to your March 11th City Council retreat, your visioning discussion on that day where you looked at being able to focus key strategic core focus areas to include affordable housing, job growth, community development, and growing your tax base with an emphasis on infill development. This is option 2, and Council asked us to bring it back this evening. At this time, this concludes our presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions. We also have staff here, including Mr. McDowell, Ms. Ball, and operating departments. Mayor, I'll turn it back over to you.
All right, thank you very much. Councilman Hunt, I'll turn it over to you. And just to remind the community that we had the public hearing on our budget 2 weeks ago, and I will ask council if we want to open it up for additional public comment, but technically we've already had the public hearing. And so we can open it up, but
you can certainly take public comment. You've had the public hearing that's required by statute, but if there's new information that you think you'd like to get comment on, you can certainly do that.
perfect. Councilman Hunt.
Mayor, I'm supportive of the staff proposal. A couple things I'd highlight. We have talked about this a number of times since March, and I think the community is familiar with the views of myself and others on council about this for the most part. I want to express appreciation to staff. This has been as Mr. Richardson pointed out, assumptions about what revenues would be has changed almost on a weekly basis. And so there have been several iterations of this budget that have had to been produced, and the work in the past week especially has been difficult. So I appreciate that. I'm especially appreciative of the 5-year view and the summarization of some of the opportunities the community has extending out over 5 years. It is the case that we're only budgeting for 1 year, for the next fiscal year that starts on July 1st. The 5-year view is actually an anticipation looking forward of what we would be able to do under various revenue assumptions. The tax increase we're talking about today really sets the stage for us to be able to strategically plan and accomplish some very important things going forward. One slight shift in characterization here. That bottom line is indicated as economic development CIP. I think that was just shorthand. We're calling it community and economic development CIP. And if you think back through some of the items that Ms. Ball highlighted, it's very much in the interest of quality of life for our citizens, a community with the kind of character that we want to live in. That also relates to a community that can attract industry and better paying jobs and help us toward affordability as well. So within our plans, it's very much a community development initiative in addition to an economic development initiative. And with that, Mayor, I would like to move that we adopt the budget as recommended by staff.
Motion has been made. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, any other comments from council?
I have a couple of questions for staff.
Councilman Smith and Councilman Bothwell.
I'd like to echo Councilman Hunt's praise for y'all dealing with trying to hit a moving target on this budget. And that's actually my first question, Mr. Richardson, is when do we anticipate the North Carolina General Assembly will finish their budget?
Mr. Rose, can you help me with that?
I'm afraid not. All I know is basically what you all know, that it's being bounced around between the houses and the General Assembly. But I don't know how close they are to final adoption.
Okay, so we'll see when that happens, and I appreciate the staff had to make some assumptions to be able to build a budget for us at all, and so choosing the House version seems like one reasonable way to go at it. I'm also aware that, however, that there's quite a big gap between the House and Senate versions, especially around issues like the utility franchise, and that I think that may be the biggest one. And so there's still a lot of uncertainty about what's going to hit us.
We did get some information from the School of Government about what your options are in a situation like this, and the thing that can't change after tonight is the tax rate. But if the General Assembly takes some action after the adoption of our budget that means that we may experience an increase in revenue, then the council can always amend the budget. You do that practically every meeting.
So do we have to set the tax rate tonight? And if it turns out that we do get hit, then money that we're talking about being in an EDCIP or being in a maintenance CIP, that could be shifted. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So this would allow us to have a buffer against what may happen, as opposed to cutting it down to the bone and crossing our fingers on the House version. Okay. And there was some talk, Kathy, you were talking about how the strategy is to grow the tax base at such a rate as to meet that expenditure rise, that wonderful chart that Lauren showed us over and over with the red line shooting up into the sky and the rest, everything else kind of staying pretty low. I know you don't have a crystal ball either, but if we make the investments in the River Arts District and make the investments in South Slope and all the other pieces that we're talking about, is that the anticipation that revenue growth is going to be able to match that expenditure growth that we're seeing?
I think that I would preface that by saying that we would not expect to see our revenues hit for probably 3 to 4 years, just because we make the investments and we're just not going to realize that. So I think there's still a period of 3 to 4 years where it's going to be, continuing to tighten as much as we can, continuing to watch our expenditures, looking for opportunities to find other ways to do service delivery. But I think at the 5 to 7 year period, we completely expected there would be money available to pay back debt service for this community and economic development CIP, as well as have additional funding for our maintenance needs as well. I think that staff's desire to be able to generate revenue to meet the operating budget as well as this maintenance capital improvement project in order to get our resurfacing of roadways, for example, lowered back down to closer to 20.
Thanks. That's all I have for now, Mayor.
Councilman Bothwell.
Yeah, I'd like to observe this, that tomorrow the headline is going to be that we raise taxes if we vote for this. And what I'd like to help people understand is tonight the county commission put off a vote until Friday on the tax structure for the CRA, which the county apparently will still go ahead with if the legislature passes that. Now, if we hadn't been excluded from that operation, the CRA, and if we had decided to move our parks operation into the CRA, then there would have been a tax increase from the county that would have covered those same operations. So what we're looking at is a question of where do those numbers appear. So presumably, because we passed this, if the legislature passes the CRA, the county will not impose as high a tax when they create the CRA, because it will not be covering the municipal parks. And I know that probably seems kind of convoluted, but we're going to get a tax increase somewhere. And it's a question of whether you pay it on the city bill or the county bill. And so don't think that this was something the city did to everyone. It's partly because over the last 10 years, the cost of fuel has doubled, for example. and we have garbage trucks that get 1.5 miles per gallon. I mean, you have to cover that kind of a cost. Those are kind of our basic operational costs. The same thing with police cars. We've got a little more efficient cars, but still not a lot more efficient at this point for the most part, and the fuel price has doubled. So all of those moving parts are why the staff has had such a terrible time coming up with some kind of final budget as the legislature dangled their puppets over us, and why we finally had to come down to this. But I'm in support of this, and I think we're going to be building for the future. So there I am.
Councilman Pelley.
Mayor, Kathy, I have one question for you, one element of the capital improvement project. There's been some questions raised about the contribution towards the Asheville Art Museum, and can you talk about how our portion of the contribution, what part of that, how is that being leveraged into the overall development plan there?
Sure. Councilman Pelley, the first thing I would point out about the Asheville Art Museum is that that is a city-owned building. And so while the Asheville Art Museum is in the process of doing major renovations, the amount that the city is proposing in this budget to contribute, the $2 million, which would be debt finance, which means the city would not be paying $2 million next year. There would be a debt service payment on it. But that is directly tied back to the cost of some major building maintenance requirements, such as the HVAC system, and those types of expenditures that are just needed to maintain the building even without the renovation. So that was the rationale behind the $2 million, recognizing that there is a campaign and I hope to move that project forward, but it really is us putting money into our building for the purposes of upgrading basic utility HVAC systems.
And what is the total projected cost for the improvements there, do you know?
I may defer to city manager for that. I've heard $22 million.
Pardon me?
22.
The rough estimate is $22 million.
So less than 10% is the contribution as
from
part
the city.
All right, thank you.
Council Vice Mayor Manheimer.
I wanted to just generally, again, thank the staff for their hard work on this budget and trying to work with a moving target. And I wanted to highlight one thing in this budget that seems really important, and that is an increased pay for staff, which is something that we haven't been able to do, and we've recognized the need to do. And there is a COLA increase in this budget for staff, which is important because our staff needs to be paid and needs to be paid competitively so that we don't lose valuable and skilled staff to neighboring communities. So I'm proud of our budget that it includes that. And I'm proud of this budget because I think it takes the first major step towards self-sustainability, which apparently is going to be our reality going forward. We have identified different areas to shore up the city, but if you can't count on the cooperation of the legislature in doing that, you're limited in your options if you're a city. And all cities across North Carolina are in our situation, and they're all struggling to figure out how to shore up their budgets. And this budget recognizes that if we invest in the infrastructure in our own community, it will pay dividends so that we can continue to grow our own revenue base to sustain our community in a way that we will enjoy and ensure our quality of life. And I would just note finally, for those who are in doubt about the different options available to us, as we've talked about, there is a legislative debate, a very real debate going on right now about revenue reform in this state that will impact all sorts of folks, individual taxpayers, companies, you name it, but there will also be a significant impact on cities, and there is a divide between the House version and the state Senate version of how that fiscal impact will be realized as to cities. The House claims to be in agreement with the governor to try to pass a revenue reform that is revenue neutral as to cities, but the President Pro Tem of the Senate, Senator Phil Berger, has been very plain in that he supports a revenue reform that will have a negative impact on cities. And he provided, in an interview this week, some suggestions for how cities shore up their revenue losses. And he suggested that cities be given the authority to tax food. He suggested that cities levy impact fees. And he suggested that cities use their water revenues. He did not provide any option that was in any way realistic for cities, and was very forthright in that that revenue reform from his perspective would be a loss for cities. So I think we've got to face the reality of the political environment we're dealing with and the revenue ramifications for cities and rely only on ourselves. And this budget is a sound budget that recognizes that reality and attempts to leverage everything we've got so that we will ensure our fiscal sustainability going forward. And I appreciate the staff's brilliant work in putting it together just to achieve that goal.
Mayor.
Councilman Davis.
I would like to echo the Vice Mayor's comments in that this is a budget that really takes this bull by the horn and does something with it. We have it's pretty amazing that we have managed to make it a 10-year period without a tax increase. With the adversity that we've had with some of the things that's happened recently in the General Assembly, it's pretty incredible that we're here with this amount. Now, we've talked, Councilman Bothwell mentioned CRA, and for those of you who are not familiar with it, that's an authority that's been authorized or in the process of being authorized that would take over the operations of our parks and cultural recreational amenities. And I had some big concerns about it. I think that we have some responsibilities to take care of those things ourselves and expect that an elected body be accountable for them. So it's not, to me, disastrous that this is happening because the tax is going to be paid anyhow. So I think that there is some advantage in us maintaining those things. I think there's some advantage in or huge advantage in our economic development CIP budget. I think that we are going to have to become self-sustaining, and we're on our way to doing that. So I think I too would appreciate the staff's work on this, and it's been very difficult. We've had a lot of transition happen during this time and a lot of uncertainty. But I feel better about it right now. There's always that ability to amend as we go forward, and I think that we're going to see some better days ahead. It's been very difficult in the last 2 years, and in fact, incredibly difficult. So hopefully this is a good start.
Councilman Smith.
One of the things I want to do is thank you, Mayor Bellamy, and you, Jan Davis, who have been here for that period during which these tax levels have not gone up and where there has been this extraordinary fiscal responsibility that's actually brought that per capita spending down over the last 10 years while improving service levels and doing all this other stuff. I think that the city owes y'all a debt for that. Just since I've been here, we've cut about $8 million over these budget gaps. We've had these budget gaps since I've been here, and we've been cutting and cutting and cutting and freezing and encouraging employees to go. And we've gotten to a point where that's no longer realistic to continue down that road. That leads us to decline if we maintain that trend. We've got the second lowest property tax rate among NC cities with metro areas. I'm thankful to the staff and to the council members who have been a part of really providing an example of fiscal responsibility. And this budget tonight, I think what it does is, A, it doesn't reduce our service levels. Make sure that the buses run, make sure that the parks stay open, make sure that our police and fire remain equipped to excel at what they do. And we get to catch up on some of this deferred maintenance. We got roofs that need replacing. We got roads that need fixing. I mean, there's not a single person in this town that thinks that we don't have a problem in regards to our road resurfacing schedule. And this allows us to address it. The economic development CIP is, as Vice Mayor Manheimer explained, that's about our future. And that's about becoming a more independent, more resilient city that can weather whatever's going on politically in other areas of government. So we can become that city that is investing in itself and seeing a return on that. And if we don't do that, there's a lost opportunity cost. There's the millions of dollars we won't see invested in our community. There's the jobs that we won't see created here. There's the housing that we won't see built here. Unless we make those investments, we lose that future. And so that's why I'm supportive of this tonight. I think this is an affirmative budget that says we as a city are going to pursue our goals and take care of our responsibilities. Thank you.
Any other comments? I guess I see the budget a little differently. When we started this process, not just in March when we had our retreat, but looking at the bid, and I asked council not to approve the bid at the time because I knew we would get here. I knew we would get to a point where it would be tight and that we would have to consider a tax rate increase. Jeff, can you go back to that slide where it looks at our tax rate over the last, I think, 13 years?
Yes, ma'am.
You know, this doesn't really tell a true depiction of the city of Asheville because it doesn't really talk about our fund balance. And we were able to weather the toughest time in our nation's history since the Great Depression because we had saved up as a community. We really did a good job of saving our money and saying, you know, we'll use it when it was really time. And we were at one point, if we were to look at a correlation, we were close to about 20% in our fund balance because we really saved up. And so we were able to chip away at our fund balance to bring it down because we were not going to increase taxes and we wanted to make sure our citizens were able to survive. And during that time, we've held the tax rate steady. And during the toughest part of the recession from 2008 to 2010, when we finally came out of it, the tax rate stayed low or consistent in spite of the fact that we were seeing our community. But we're coming back. And we had a presentation not too long ago where we actually went to hear from the Tourism Development Authority to see what's happening from their perspective, to see how our community was doing with people coming back to visit our community. And we're seeing double-digit increases in the number of people who are staying in our hotels and spending money in our community. We got an update from them to say that they're anticipating next year to see even greater numbers from the tourism industry. Just in 1 week alone, the city of Asheville had several job announcements. We announced 92 jobs yesterday. Got beat up in the paper for announcing 50 jobs from France last week. I had to throw that out there. That was free. But things are changing when it comes to our community, and we're not the same place that we were 5 years ago or 10 years ago. I can honestly say that I hadn't voted for a tax increase because we had our savings, we had our funding, we could find a way to find money. But this year is a new year, it's a new dynamic when we don't have a state government that's willing to work with us. When we have county commissioners who will partner with people to say, we are going to cut you out of a potential cost savings to you of $5 million. We're cutting that out. Why? Just because. Not because it's good government, not because it makes good sense, not because it doesn't help, just because. I was fighting for the CRA 2 weeks ago because I really believe that a regional asset should be paid by regional users. It makes sense to me. And to be cut out just because, that's not good public policy. Tonight I'm going to vote for the tax increase. I would prefer it had been 3%, a 3-cent tax increase as opposed to 4 personally, just because put in 1 for CIP, 1 for maintenance, and 1 just to keep us revenue neutral. But don't have the support for 3, and it is 4. But I will say this, that when I look at the CIP, the future investments, I am concerned that the aspirational budget that we're proposing and projecting to see the increases to go into, it may not happen. And it may not happen because of the relationship that's fractured at the state level. And we may be using it just to do basic operational services. That's my concern, that because of the relationship we have at the state level, where we're not walking in collaboration to make this a better aspirational city and region, that we may be coming back later on this year and next year looking at, instead of doing those aspirational, visionary things that would increase the tax base, to saying, hey, just to keep the buses running on time and making sure that police officers have an increase in cars to keep them running and making sure the IT department keeps everything in place, we're going to have to transfer what we would have liked to have done and put that in another place. I would ask council's consideration. Now, we are making this big hit of 4 cents, and we hadn't done it in many, many years. But we do have people who are struggling in this community. And so I'm going to bring up later on that same agenda the fact that we have people can't even afford to send their kids to our city parks and services. So I'm going to ask the same council that we look for scholarships for individuals who can't afford to send their kids to pay for the basic city services that we offer. They just can't afford it. And so I'm going to ask that this same aspirational thinking council to consider supporting people who need scholarships to be able to make sure their kids are safe during the summer and have the ability to use the facilities that they're paying for. So that's going to come later. So I'm going to support the motion that's been presented tonight for the first time ever, because we've cut down our savings to the bare minimum that we as a city said that we want. 2, we haven't done it in many, many years. 3, that the investments that we're going to make are really needed. And I've heard repeatedly that our maintenance needs to be increased for our streets and our sidewalks, our roads, that people really want to see that increase. And that 4, that the investments that we're going to make, hopefully without the state doing anything else to us, will provide an increased tax base for our community that will ensure that people who live in our community, who make it great, can also work in our community. And with that being said, all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Since we had a public hearing, you're welcome to speak. The only thing is we already had the public comment, but out of deference, Mr. Michael Love, and I think it was another hand I saw, I'll open it up for anything you want to say. And I apologize, but we did have the public hearing on this.
I haven't been before City Council since I had left in the early 90s. I want to lay a little foundation here. I had your job for 3 years. I had your job for 8 years. I was on the City Council for 8 years, so I was a council member. I had Esther's job for 1 year and your job for 4 years. And that was from the 70s to the 90s, early 90s. I wouldn't have your job now because, for one, we got 2 representatives in the General Assembly that aren't even city taxpayers or city residents trying to run the city. What I want to talk to you about this evening, though, is something that I've been working with for the last 18 months, and that's Pack Place and the Art Museum. I've attended 95% of the board meetings, executive committee meetings. I facilitate the management committee meetings, and I resign today. Let me give you an overview of my concerns. And Maggie's probably one of the oldest staff members here, not figuratively, but has been here a long time. And she knows that I'm not the type that's going to get up and give everybody a hard time, and I like to see things go well. But this is a matter that's not going well. Let me give you an overview of the issues. The proposed City of Asheville budget allocates $2 million to the Asheville Art Museum renovations. The city is proceeding with separating the lease between the city and Pack Place Education, Arts, and Science Center into 2 leases, one for Pack Place and one for the Art Museum. We're talking about that building, the old Plaza Theater, up on the corner of the square. It's a big building, 100,000 square feet. The city is agreeing to physically separate Pack Place building into two buildings. Issues of having two leases and building separate issues have created an atmosphere of distrust towards the Art Museum among Pack Place board members. There is limited information available about the Art Museum project and their day-to-day operations. There is the potential of destroying the Pack Place organization as an institution, and there has been limited opportunity for public input and information sharing regarding all of these issues. My personal opinion with regard to the above matters, after working with Pack Place for 18 months, are as follows. The $2 million allocation for the Art Museum. I've heard the scope of the Art Museum Capital Fund drive being anywhere from $15 to $25 million. What is the amount?
So you can provide your written statements to the clerk and she will pass them around.
Pardon?
You can provide your written statements to the clerk and she will pass them around so we can complete reading them. Or would you like to
Vice
continue?
Mayor, I would ask that in deference to former Mayor Michael Love's work for this city, and
We've completed list.
I would like to listen.
I'm supportive of that as well.
Okay. You will need your comments back. Maggie has them. Oh, he has this extra copy. Okay. Please proceed.
What is the amount? Where are they in the amount of money raised to date? When will the fund drive end and when will the new construction begin? The Asheville Art Museum fundraising has got to be the longest capital fund drive in the history of Asheville. And word has it that they are less than halfway there. If the private sector had believed in the project, and the private sector would have funded it by now. My belief is that there is not another $9 to $15 million in private money in this community for this project. So now in desperation, the Art Museum has come to the council, county commissioners, and likely the state for funding and separation of their portion of the building from the rest of the building. What does investing $15 to $25 million in building a not-for-profit structure in downtown Asheville do for the economy of the community? Nothing. There's no tax base. I think the question is also answered by what great loss did the city have when the Health Adventure went bankrupt and moved to Biltmore Square. The Health Adventure was the 800-pound gorilla in its day, and the Health Adventure had considerably more visitors than the Art Museum. Is a new building basically in the same space really going to bring more people downtown than are already coming downtown? What will be the cost of establishing a second main entrance for the Art Museum, the capital costs, the legal right-of-way, the safety and handicapped issues? Has the council seen an actual breakdown of the Art Museum's capital cost, and does it include the expense of that second main entrance? I feel that due to numerous extenuating circumstances, the economy, the water system issues, the CRA, the minimal fund balance of 14 to 16% versus 25 to 30%, which I believe is more along the lines of what the local government commission wants the city of the Asheville side to have. I feel that the Art Museum should not be considered for capital funding, and that there be one lease between Pack Place and the city of Asheville as currently exists. If necessary, authorize Pack Place to sublease space to member organizations. There's an atmosphere of distrust. One person's dream can be a nightmare for others. That's my assessment of the current state of affairs between Pack Place an education, arts, and science center, and Asheville, and an Asheville institution. The Art Museum is just a member of Pack Place that wants its independence. It appears that the Art Museum agenda for independence is paramount regardless of the damage to other members and Pack Place as an institution. The current plan to separate the building into two buildings and to have two direct leases is a path to destroying the Pack Place institution. And I believe that the council is giving in to sound management policies and sound management principles by creating a situation where the city management and the council have to deal with two organizations instead of one. Pack Place clearly has the corporate structure in place in terms of the existing lease, council representation, and funding by the city and the county. It's all there. There's no need to create something else. The Art Museum has been unnecessarily secretive in its dealings with Pack Place Board. There is not a good feeling of free-flowing and honest information sharing. Has the council given the board members and executives of the Coburn Earth Science Museum and the Diane Orthon Theater and the YMI the same private audience regarding their true feelings about what has been going on as the council has given or council members have given to the Art Museum? Has the council done its own fact-finding and its homework? Two leases. I believe council has been advised by the Art Museum that donors will not donate to the Art Museum if there is not a separate direct lease between the city and the Art Museum. I believe the major donor mentioned was the Tourist Development Authority. One, if you have asked the TDA for a written statement regarding this, I think you will find that is not a requirement of their grant. Two,
sir, are we nearing the end here? Are we? How much longer do you think?
I think this is important and to the council.
Well, we have a number of items remaining on the agenda. I would like to move the meeting along.
Rest of the council feel?
Well, this was an indication I was getting from the rest of council.
I think we're beginning to cover some of the same ground. I think there's an opportunity that we can read the rest of the presentation.
Josh, proceed.
Go ahead, Mr. Michaeloff. Another minute or two.
All right. First issue was, have you asked the TDA, is that a fact that they require a direct lease? I believe if you ask them, they will say no, it's not a requirement. Two, Bob Oast advised the Pack Place Board over a year ago that any donor issue regarding leasing and donation protections could be easily resolved by adding one new paragraph to the existing lease between the city and Pack Place. One new paragraph. Three, donors don't care about leasing issues. They care about purpose. And they care about having their name on the structure. A direct lease between the city and Asheville Art Museum is wasteful in terms of time and money, and the idea should be terminated and let the board of Pack Place deal with those issues. Why should Pack Place, the Art Museum, and the city be independently paying attorneys to work out these issues? Why not make it simple? The Pack Place Board can sublease space to the Asheville Art Museum and the other members. It's a simple and inexpensive process. On the physical separation of the two buildings, let me draw you a simple picture of this potential mess as if it were your home. Your teenager comes in and says to you and your spouse, I'm taking the front door entrance, the hallway, the living room, the kitchen, the downstairs bathroom for my personal use. You can't come in my space without my permission. Even if you need to fix the plumbing, you will have to use the back door as your entrance and take your name off the mailbox in the house. I will put in a new heater in the basement, but I will use your electricity, ductwork, and plumbing. I will live there rent-free. Now that's what's going to happen there at Pack Place. The Asheville Art Museum has caused Pack Place and the other members the unnecessary expense of tens of thousands of dollars in time and cash to cater to the desire for a separation of the building and a direct lease. I believe all of this is basically for one person's interest. Separation of this building into two buildings is ludicrous and unnecessary, costly in terms of dollars, time, and disruption. You have no idea of the numerous complications separating the building entails. Just to mention a few: a second main entrance, dealing with the safety and handicapped issues, disruption of the flow of pedestrian traffic, disruption of other member space, separating portions of the electrical and mechanical systems.
Thank you, Mr. McLeod. If you'll give me the rest of the remarks to Maggie or to Jamie, I will read the rest, but I hear your concerns and that this issue needs to be looked at closely. Thank you, Mr. McLeod.
Given that, I will distribute this to you.
That's fine. Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Yes. And since you have not served in all these seats, you have not been a city manager, city attorney, city clerk, nor a council member, 3 minutes.
3 minutes. But I want to give him my 3 minutes to Mr. Michael Love in respect of his service to our community any day of the week. So,
thank you.
Good evening, council. I'm Adrian Vasallo, president of the Asheville Downtown Association. And I do want to thank council and staff for their significant work on this budget. Other than pulling the numbers together and all the uncertainty with Raleigh, they've also had to put up with a lot of emails from me. And I'm sure countless others that are questioning some of the line items that were in the budget. So they put up with a lot. Thank you. When I look at the budget, and specifically some of the comments made tonight, I see that there is a recognition that downtown is vibrant and that it continues to need attention from our city leaders. I also hear from city staff that they recognize the impact that an investment in downtown can have. The 3,000% return on tax dollar investment in downtown is real. We've seen it for 25 years in downtown. The revitalization that you've seen in the traditional core of downtown was made possible by the leaders that thought that parking decks were the right thing to do. And those parking decks were built, and they came in droves, and they continue to come in droves. There's no doubt that we see on any given day right now a significant influx of visitors and citizens to our downtown core. But our downtown is much bigger than you can walk from here. Our downtown includes West Patton, where Jan Davis's store is. Our downtown includes the South Slope, which we said back in February was one of the Downtown Association's top issues for this year. A top issue that we have for every year is cleanliness and safety. Those are basic, fundamental city services that we expect, not just in downtown, but throughout our neighborhoods. When I look at the proposed budget, and I see a $30 million proposed investment in the river, and a less than $2 million investment in downtown, I have to wonder where we're looking at assumptions on these finances. I love what's going on in the river, and this is not about the river. This is about recognition of the impact an investment can have in downtown. And if we can get a 3,000% return on the South Slope versus a 2,000% return in the river, we should be spending more in downtown. And some of those spendings, which are not infrastructure related, have to do with cleanliness and safety. This budget allocates nothing in the coming fiscal year for recycling and trash cans in downtown. We need additional ones, not just in the city core, but down the South Slope. Jan Davis still does not have trash cans on West Patton. You should have made that happen. We have to focus on some of the fundamentals as well. And I would encourage council, even though you've approved this budget, to look at ways to allocate funding to some of those services that we need in downtown. The Downtown Association is convicted on this to support cleanliness, and we will be having a downtown cleanup day on Monday, and I hope to see you there. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the community wishing to address council? All right, council, we're going to take a break here. We do have a closed session that we need to discuss a couple of things. And Councilman Perry, if you'll read the closed session motion, please.
Mayor, I move that Asheville City Council go into closed session for the following reason. One, to consult with an attorney employed by the city about matters with respect to which the attorney-client privilege between the city and its attorney must be preserved, including a lawsuit involving the following parties: State of North Carolina, City of Asheville, Metropolitan Sewer District of Buncombe County. Statutory authorization is contained in GS 143-318.11A3. Second, to consider the qualifications, competence, performance, character, fitness, conditions of appointment of an individual public officer or employee, and to hear or investigate a complaint, charge, or grievance against an individual public officer or employee. The statutory authorization is contained in GS 143-318.11A6, and to prevent the disclosure of information that is confidential pursuant to GS 160A-168, the Personnel Privacy Act. The statutory authorization is contained in GS 143-318.11A1. Third, to prevent disclosure of information that is privileged and confidential pursuant to the laws of North Carolina or not considered a public record within the meaning of Chapter 132 of the General Statutes. The law that makes the information privileged and confidential is NCGS 143-318.10E. Statutory authorization is contained in NCGS 143-318.11A1.
Second. Any further questions or comments from council? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. We're in closed session.
I was thinking they're not going to be able to do this.
I'd like to call the Asheville City Council meeting back for June 25th, 2013. Council, we left off under unfinished business. We have one more item, and it's a resolution adopting the living wage for full and part-time city employees in general service contracts, $30,000 and above. Ms. Brenda Mills will make the presentation, but until Ms. Mills comes, because she's not here, I will call on some staff person who will look at me like they know what to address, and since I don't see anyone doing that, I'm going to move forward. Next is new business, item A, resolution amending the 2012-13 consolidated annual CDBG and home action plan to provide the balance of the canceled East Riverside Home Project to the residents at Glen Rock Home Project. Jeff Stottinger is here, and so we're going to go ahead and hear this presentation. Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Council, and thank you for the opportunity to make this presentation regarding an amendment to our 2012-2013 annual CDBG Home and Action Plan. The funds that are being recommended here to fund the residences at Glen Rock come from a 2008 home grant. That home grant was to be used to fund condominium development along the East Riverside area by Mountain Housing Opportunity, and I think knowing the timing of that, we're all grateful, frankly, that that project did not happen. The funds, but HUD does require that those funds be used to create affordable housing. And so with the residences at Glen Rock project, which is 22 units, rehabilitation of a historic structure on Depot Street in the River Arts District. 11 of those units are affordable to households earning 60% or less than median income, and 11 of those units will be affordable to households earning 80% of median income. So 100% of those households meet our definition of affordable housing. These units will be being developed by Mountain Housing Opportunities and will be owned and operated by Mountain Housing Opportunities. There was an additional roughly $35,000 left that had not been spent towards pre-development for that original East Riverside project. The Home Consortium earlier this year met and agreed that those funds should be allocated to the residences of Glen Rock. It helps make sure that the project stays whole in terms of its construction cost. It meets HUD's requirements and the home program requirement to produce the affordable housing, and therefore the consortium board of directors brings you their recommendation to approve that allocation as an amendment to our action plan. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have about it.
Thank you, Mr. Stottinger. Council, any questions, comments, or a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any member of the community wishing to address council on this particular issue? All right, all in favor from council, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. The motion carries. Council, since we're under new business, real quick, I will go back to the discussion on amending the fees and charges manual to reduce the fees.
Madam Mayor. I'm sorry to interrupt.
We will come back to that in just a second.
Coming back to the...
And so the discussion of amending fees and charges manual to reduce fees for summer programs, I wanted to go ahead and get that. I saw Mr. Roderick Simmons come in and want to get that addressed very quickly.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, Council. In your packet is an analysis of the last year's summer playground program that outlined the numbers of cost expense rationale for that program. As we worked through the fees and charges manual adoption earlier this year, I became aware that staff was working with underprivileged families, families that couldn't afford the program, in order to make the programs accessible, had been working with them. The only way to accomplish this is through a fee and charge waiver in the manual. So we made that correction in the upcoming fees and charges adoption by adding a line in there that if a family has on a reduced lunch or free lunch program, they will receive the program at a discount rate. So we addressed it on the front end for next year. This current fiscal year, Council adopted the fees and charges manual with no fee waiver or scholarship program in the current ordinance. So at this time, we'll take policy direction from Council in order to waive the fees for the current summer program, which started last Monday.
Can I just ask a clarifying question? So if a child qualifies for a free or reduced lunch during the regular school year through their school system, they would receive the summer camp for free? They wouldn't have to pay any tuition, or there'd be a reduction?
Next year it's a reduction based off of if it's 1 or 2 members. The budget, the adoption with the current budget council is on a sliding scale. And I think I have it right here. So with the summer playground, it's the fee is going up to $50 a week next year. If they qualify for free or reduced lunch, it will be $30 per week. Currently, it's $50.
For the first child, and then?
For the first child, and it's a sliding $10 difference for the second child.
Is it, Roderick, how long is the day during the summer camp program?
It's from 8 o'clock, 8:30 in the morning till 5:30. So it's an all-day program.
Roderick, in terms of the free and reduced lunch, does the family, the parent, have to bring evidence, some sort of document?
Yes, the school system, they have to fill out a form at the school system that shows that they have free and reduced lunch. And we're going to put that policy in for next year. Currently, we don't have a scholarship program in place. So next year, we're going to work out those details between now and next summer to have that mechanism in place to check.
I'm sorry, I'm not tracking this. Currently, in order to have any reduction in the fee for this current year,
we have to amend the fee and charges ordinance that council adopted last budget year.
and the direction we're looking for tonight might include some provision that if you're on free or reduced lunch.
It could. I'll just let you know that next year we have something in place for a type of scholarship program that's built into the fees and charges manual. Currently, we don't have anything in the fees and charge manual that allows staff to waive the fees for participants. So tonight, if council would like to address this summer, I'm looking for policy direction on what that fee reduction should be so that we can go ahead and administer it. And the program started last Monday.
Just to finish my point, if we're going to do something this summer, I would recommend that we do it based on the free and reduced lunch qualification as demonstrated with written evidence by the parent, and that we gather that and keep it on file centrally to provide that audit trail of granting the reductions.
Correct. Yes, if council was to authorize us to have a fee reduction, we need some criteria in place to make it fair for everyone and not subjective. It really needs to be something, and the free and reduced lunch program would be what we would recommend as staff, because it's easy and we don't have to manage it. It's already completed by the school.
I think it's a great qualifier.
Any other comments or motions?
Well, just a question, Councilman Hunt, if school is already out.
They still have the information.
The current school year. We will go based off of the current school year.
Roderick, is you said camp started
last Monday.
Last Monday, not this Monday.
Correct.
And so there's 2 sessions. One's a 4-week session, one's a 5-week session. It seems difficult to. Do you already have to have registered for session 2? Do you have people already registered?
You can register at any time. So we have some kids that come 1 week, and they may not register for the whole block. We try to get them for 4-week block. But some parents, because some kids stay with their grandparents, they drop them in and out. So we're flexible with when you come into the program. So it wouldn't be a problem. We would just let the parents know whatever that fee reduction is prior to the next week starting.
Well, I mean, in some cases, it sounds like a fee may be imposed where a parent wasn't paying a fee at all. They would now provide evidence of free and reduced lunch and have to pay something.
Correct.
Where they weren't paying anything.
Correct, unless council direct us to waive the fees currently. Yes, and that's kind of some of the feedback we're getting now, because when I found out that we didn't have a council-adopted policy, I told staff they cannot waive fees until we have something adopted by council. That's why you're getting some parents that hadn't paid before now saying they have to pay.
So explain to me, just logistically, do people sign up for can they sign up for 1, 2, 3, or 4 weeks of session 1, or do they sign up for all of session 1?
Correct. No, we try to get them to sign up for the whole 4 weeks, but we know that's not feasible for some parents because we got some grandparents that take care of kids.
Yeah.
So we do it on a week-by-week basis. We just keep a roster, so it's not really an administration nightmare for us
so
to
session
do
1, session 2 is slightly meaningless.
Yeah, correct. It's just the formality of us trying to block, so that we know the numbers, so we have enough staff.
Yeah. So I'm just trying to get a feel for it, because I know, I'm sending my kids to summer camps, and they're fairly rigid in terms of you sign up for a 2-week session, you got to pay for the whole 2 weeks. You can't just pay for 1 week and come to 1 week. So just getting a feel for, and I know it's really difficult for parents to change things up on them. So I'm wondering if, what would be the easiest way to implement it for this year that would be the least disruptive to the parents, but still allow us to recover some of the costs? What do you think? I mean, in terms of administering it, would it be best, obviously last week's already happened, we're in the middle of this week. If we were to make a policy decision tonight, it might take just, you got to communicate that to parents.
Correct.
What kind of timeline is realistic in terms of imposing a fee?
Right. I think we can communicate it out to the parents. So a lot of the parents, the kids not participating aren't in the program now. We do have some that are paying. So I think it's a matter of getting the rosters from kids that came last summer and letting them know that from this point forward in the summer, here's your either fee waiver or fee reduction, and communicate that out. And we can use our resources here at the city with the information office, working with DAWA to get that information out, and also the community center directors know a lot of the community, and we can get the word out. So I'm not concerned with us not being able to reach the community. We can get the word out, especially if they're going to get some relief in terms of having to pay the fee.
Councilman Davis.
I know I should have kept closer track of numbers than this, but how many children do we have now that are there under a presumed scholarship that are not paying, and how many do we have that are paying?
Right. Currently, right now, we have none under scholarship, because when I found out, I told staff everyone has to pay. So we're right at about 100 kids right now at all our sites. Last year, we served about 346 kids.
So the reason we don't have as many this year is obviously we're charging.
You can make that assumption, correct, yeah.
So everybody there now is paying, so it would not be a terrible inequitable thing to talk about a fee reduction on the second week of this, or the second session.
Okay, I didn't understand that.
Yeah, I think the biggest concerns are the parents that can't afford and the kids that stand at home. I think that's what you're hearing from the community.
And that's pretty regrettable. Are we getting people from the community that are complaining about us changing that policy, or feeling like the policy was changed?
Right, yeah, and from my perspective is when I found out staff was doing that, there's a right way to go about doing it, and we bring it back and council adopt the fees and charges manual every year. We just did not put a fee waiver in there, have that authorization from council, so I couldn't authorize staff to continue to do that past practice. So we tried to address it by making sure that it was in the future fee changes, but we didn't go back and address last year's fee changes, so I instructed staff to charge what council authorized us to charge.
Mayor, I might have a motion to make, but Mr. Simmons, first, the recommendation for next year, could you restate the fee rate and then the reduced rate that you would recommend?
Yes, and I'll just use the one site at the summer camp. The after school is a different site. For the, excuse me, for the after school program, it's $50 a week. The reduced for lunch, free reduced lunch, you get it $30 a week. When you get to the summer camp, the fee, current fee, school current fee is $105 per week. The reduced and free lunch will be $75 per week. That's for the summer.
What is the fee schedule attached to the agenda then?
That doesn't include the discounts.
Well, it says $40 per week for first child plus 10.
That's the current. That's this year. That's not. I was addressing next year's fee changes.
I'm sorry.
The current fee changes is what I attached to your agenda. That's what we're currently operating right now. So currently the 40 and 30 and $10 registration fee is what you see we're currently charging this budget year, because the new fees and charges don't go into effect until after July. So that will be next summer before we tackle the fee and charges manual.
The motion I would make, and I'm open for further debate on this, would be that the per week fee, but not the registration fee, for kids of families that qualify for free or reduced lunch be reduced by $15 per week. So 40 would turn into 25, 50 would turn into 35. And that be made effective both going forward and retroactive. And please tell me if the calculation would be difficult, but for a free and reduced family that has already paid a couple weeks, if we can credit them back the the scholarship they would have earned in the first 2 weeks, that will enable them to keep their kid in the camp longer. So I'd like to see it made effective all summer.
Okay.
I'm not sure if my $15.
Where's the 15, what is that based upon?
Well, there's no other recommendation for how to fix this summer. Based roughly on ratios that he's recommended for next summer, the $15 this year would seem within the range. I might have missed the math there, but I'm just trying to.
Why don't we just base it on the free and reduced lunch program and let staff come up with that as opposed to the arbitrary number of $15 and let staff work on that?
Explain the 15, what was it for?
The fee reduction would be $15 per child if that child is eligible for free or reduced lunch at school.
But when you say free and reduced lunch, that's two different categories. It's either free or it's reduced. That's not the same thing. And so when you're telling staff that, so you're saying a person who qualifies for free lunch, which means their parents make a lower income than those who make a reduced lunch, they get the same treatment?
Well, again, I think we're just we're being asked to make policy right here on the spot for something that can work tomorrow. I wish we had a better recommendation from staff that had fleshed this out. But your suggestion makes sense, Mayor, and so I'll modify my motion to suggest that if you're on reduced lunch, you get a $10 credit. If you're on free lunch, you get a $20 discount. I mean, we've got to pack something together to go forward. We can't wait 2 more weeks to sort this out.
So
there's a motion and a second.
Can I and that's fine, the motion and the second is fine with me. I spent a few years on the Jewish Community Center board and studied ad nauseum summer camp fees, after-school camp fees, overhead costs. I can't believe our numbers are actually what they are stated in the material we provided in terms of our overhead costs associated with servicing this many children for this kind of a camp day. And I suspect that we probably have much greater overhead costs, but it's spread out somehow. So I would appreciate if we could send this to finance so we could look at our after-school program and our summer camp program in more detail, since we've already recognized that Parks and Rec is an area we heavily subsidize already. And I would appreciate learning more about the true cost of providing the service and what our charges are related to that. I'm not, I think a city needs to make a fundamental decision whether it's going to provide a service like this or not, and it's obviously very important to the community. So I'm not debating that. I just would appreciate learning a lot more about this, and having worked with other, YMCA or the JCC or other programs that provide after-school services, all these places have a process for getting tuition waivers or any kind of offset of the costs through an application process showing need. I kind of suspect the city may have been the only gig in town not requiring some lengthy paperwork to get a discount. So I think that it warrants some further scrutiny going forward so we know we got it right.
I'm happy to send this to finance, but I think it's important to also include the fact that we need to look at the actual income of the families who actually use our system. And on average, it's the lowest of the lowest income people in our community. And it's not apples to apples with the parent who's paid for a lot of the services to the YMCA, the YWCA, after-school programs, summer camps, the camps that the Soccer Association puts together. It's not apples to apples with the program, and nor is it apples to apples with the income of the people who use it. And so, yes, we do subsidize Parks and Rec services as we subsidize police, fire, transit, greenways, and we subsidize it. And I think that is a basic city service. It's located in most of the communities that are felt by people who are lower income, and I look forward to seeing how it proceeds.
Mayor, did you have a suggestion that was different from the motion?
I think staff should look at the numbers. We're pulling the numbers out the air that's not based upon anything that we could say this is why we chose those numbers. And if staff could tomorrow look at this issue all day tomorrow, how long it takes to get the numbers to see what's right for the fee level for the free lunch and the reduced lunch, I'm okay with that, but just to pull, and it may be the same numbers, but at least it'd be based upon something. But as long as it's happening this year, I'm happy with that to occur as soon as possible, because we have families who are leaving their children at home while they go work all day, unsupervised, and this will provide them at least the opportunity to have families that have kids who have been supervised, monitored, and in a better condition.
Certainly.
Councilman Bothwell.
Should we consider this for the first session and then look at it again in 2 weeks?
No,
for
we
the
should
second
just go ahead and get it done.
Okay. Okay.
All right, it's a motion and a second on the floor.
Okay, so a couple of things. I'm not sure I do either. I'm going to ask Mark to restate the motion in a moment, but I'm supportive of a scholarship program. This is a really important thing that we're doing for the working families and folks who just can't get their kids out. I think that what we're doing is trying to address some of the achievement gap issues in our community. But I think in the future, one of the things I'd like to see us do is to do some outcome measures around these programs and to see what we are doing around the achievement gap, and just generally in addressing the city's strategic goals. How can we best do that via these programs? So going forward, Roderick, I'd appreciate it if y'all would kind of start thinking about that and what that might look like, so we can see how we can make it the most effective program that we can. I was curious about one thing. How did you learn that the practice was in place?
When we were going through the fees and charges manual update to bring to council when we were looking at cost recovery, the conversation I had with staff, they indicated that we had a scholarship program, and I said, no, we don't have a scholarship program. It's not authorized by council. So when I went back and looked, I couldn't find anything in actual adopted by council, and I looked back at the fees and charges manual, there was nothing there. So it's just been a practice of staff to work with neighborhood citizens and parents that can't afford programs just to make sure their kids had a place to go. So it's just been one of those phantom rules that staff say, this is my job, I need to work with my community. So just trying to provide that program. So it was in all our centers. It wasn't just one or two sites. It was just, they had an understanding that they were supposed to work with the community and not turn any kids away. And we just didn't have it authorized by council.
And very kind-hearted and community-minded. The practice without the approval does give me a lot of disappointment and heartburn. So I'm glad that we're going to be putting a policy in place tonight.
And just in defense of staff, it's been in place for years. I mean, before Roger even got in the location, in the position, has been in place for years to know that the parents can send their kids to the recreation centers and not have to pay the full amount. And so it's been not just 5 years, it's been decades that's been the practice, and it wasn't until this year that it became an issue. And while we can look for full cost recovery, I don't think we'll get it, but it should be telling that if we served 374 kids last summer, we only have 100, something changed, something's wrong. So it's going to be funny that we're going to sit here and talk about a livable wage, but at the same time can't provide an opportunity for people who really need it.
So we are saying we are going to provide it. It's just the practice without the policy is troubling.
And just one final note, when we do this in finance, if it's the will of council to send it to finance, I would appreciate knowing how other cities deal with their summer programs and their after-school programs, and kind of have a survey of what their fees and charges are associated with the same service, how large their programs are, that kind of thing. I know Asheville Middle is now running an after-school program, and they have a very formal sign-up process. They would be someone I would want to look at a comparison with them. So just kind of a thorough, broad view of best practices for this kind of service.
And I'm also supportive of what the mayor was saying around having a different tiered system for those on free lunch and those on reduced lunch.
Yeah, I would assume that would be in any kind of research regarding the service.
All in favor of the motion? Well, no, I didn't ask for the public. Any member of the community wants to speak to council on this issue? Yes, if you come forward and state your name for the record. And council, any other comments or questions that you may have, we'll pull it up. I'll call on you as soon as we close this. Yes.
I'm Alan Ditmore. I read the schedule and was concerned by I think it might have been the old fee schedule, but I was concerned by the discrimination against only children, that there's a discount for the second child in a family. So now I have concerns about the moral hazards coming from taxing not only childless people, but also people who have one child, and using that to subsidize large families. So it brings a second tier into this, and there's only children who meet any income category. There's only children on free lunch and reduced lunch and low income, and to think that all only children are rich. Well, actually, if all only children are rich, maybe that would encourage people to become parents of only children. But they're not, and you can't reserve all your sympathy for large families. And if you do that, you're going to not only exclude small families that deserve sympathy every bit as much, but you're also going to have environmental consequences to the point where you're not going to be able to call yourself, if you run these moral hazards, you're not going to be able to call yourself a green city with a straight face. These large-scale childcare funding needs to go hand in hand with contraception funding, so that you don't overwhelm your community. Just like just the same way we're treating our pets better than we treat ourselves. We understand the consequences with our animals, and yet we can't seem to apply it introspectively. But we can't call ourselves a green city while we favor large families this much, or at least we can't in the absence of city contraception spending. And I just saw McNeil Lehrer, I guess, had a book about how cities are taking over when the federal government fails them, and they were talking about LA Transit, and I don't know how many of you watched that, but LA Transit and other examples of cities stepping up when the feds fail. And they failed to mention contraception, and this is the key area where cities have to step up where the feds fail, because the feds are failing. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to address council on this issue? Yes, sir. If you could state your name for the record.
Good evening, council. My name is Timothy Sadler, and while it might not be practical for this summer to get the kids the best possible food, I think it should be a long-term goal to get the kids in these programs local, organic, and most importantly, GMO-free food. The more that we are learning about these GMOs, the more that we're learning the environmental impacts and also the health impacts that these GMOs cause. And if we look around the world, other countries are banning these dangerous poisons that we consume every day, and I would just ask council to be mindful that we will be feeding these kids those poisons this summer, and we should strive and aspire towards something better for them. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to address council on this issue? All right, Councilman Davis, you had another comment?
Yeah. And I've forgotten the motion, unfortunately. I'm going to have it read again, but I think a problem I feel with this is that, as the mayor said, there were 340 kids last year, and we're at 100 some this year. I'm concerned about I'm certain that the 200 are not there, are probably for financial reasons, and we're talking about the poorest kids out there in many of these instances. And I think if we change something dramatically where we went to a subsidized situation completely, we would end up overwhelmed for the second session of this. So I do feel like there should be a way of those kids who were campers last year that were there under what they thought was a scholarship that we find some way, somehow, to get them into that second session. And it may be at a very reduced cost, or it may be even subsidized, but I think those kids are, in many instances, at home by themselves or with an older sibling that probably not the best role models, and this is an opportunity. It's more community development than it is a recreation. It's very different than the Jewish Community Center, quite frankly. It's not I don't think our attendance is down because they decide they wouldn't come this year. I think that we've got kids that are in a very precarious and perilous situation in many instances. So if there was a way of finding a way to get these kids into that second session of this summer camp would be a really great thing. I think you probably may do more tonight with that than we did with a lot of things that we talked about in the budget tonight. So that's I'm just rambling, don't know how to get there.
Well, and I'm not implying that this is the same constituency.
No,
I'm not saying that.
I did not mean to.
Yeah, I'm not saying that.
Did not mean to imply you were, but I know this is not
right. All I'm saying is I think we'd be hard pressed to find another city that let most kids attend camp for free without any kind of requirement to establish a need on an income basis. Now, we can opine that that's the situation, and that may very well be true, but I can't imagine that given the cost of providing these kinds of services that other cities are functioning in this way. So we've probably made an overcorrection now that we've discovered the problem, and we all of a sudden have a third of the enrollment. But barring continuing to not charge the attendance, how else can we go forward from this point forward?
Well, one option might be, and try to cut to the end of this, if folks demonstrate the free and reduced lunch, if they demonstrate that free lunch at the beginning of next week, that they could begin at a sharply reduced rate, or perhaps a full scholarship rate, that the reduced lunch folks could, as Councilman Hunt suggested, have that $15 reduction and all else pay full fee.
And since we're boring into this some, I have another question. Is the 340 the number of kids who were participating at this point last year? Or is that the total number who participated last summer?
Total number. Total number for the summer.
Total.
Well, so you could have had a kid come first session, and somebody else. So you're just talking about.
There's just the total we served for.
But we're only in the second session. We're already up to 100 kids.
Correct.
So we could very well see the same numbers by the end of the summer.
It's on the track to be lower, right, Robert?
Yeah, so we don't track it weekly, but yes, I mean, that first week is always hit or miss because kids just not getting out of school and different vacations. So we should see an uptick this week, but some of it is because of they're having to pay, because we have some parents that didn't pay last year that are staying out, but I can't give you those numbers because I really don't know the situation because I haven't talked to all of them, but I can say that there's a percentage, the numbers are down because of that.
I can restate my motion.
Well, if I understood your motion correctly, it was to do the $15 reduction. No.
Let me restate it. Based on documented evidence paid by parents, brought by parents, presented to staff that will be retained centrally and verified by the department. Families, children of families that qualify for free lunch would get a $20 reduction per child per week for enrollment. Children of families that qualify for reduced lunch would get a $10 per week reduction in the fee.
That's what I seconded.
And we could, I'm open to making that a little more generous. I believe strongly that evidence, documented evidence should be provided to qualify. There's no reason we shouldn't start that this year. I believe that parents paying some amount is some amount, even if it's nominal, can be important.
I guess, Mark, those folks that are on that free lunch are so very financially restricted that I would be comfortable with having that first child fee being for the free lunch folks just be the registration fee part, and actually waiving the rest, and for the reduced lunch have it be the $10 registration fee plus $20. So it would actually cost $10 a week for the free lunch folks, $30 for the reduced lunch folks, full fee for the rest.
Okay. I'll
amend your
agree to
motion.
Yeah, I'm cool with that, yeah.
And to be clear, Roderick, when we say $10 weekly registration fee, if a child registers for 5 consecutive or 8 consecutive weeks, it's $10 per week that's collected. Okay.
Roderick, I think it's important that you get the numbers to council so council can see what we're working with when people have free lunch, what their income is, and reduced lunch.
Yes.
If we could get that data from the school system pretty soon so council can see what that looks like for people. And just so people know that's verified. They not only have to verify it with the paperwork, they have to actually send the check stubs. And so it's, when they get free and reduced lunch, it's not because they say, oh, I make only this
Well, I
amount of
understand.
money.
I'm familiar with the program.
They really make low income. Thank you, council. We do have an amended motion. Is there a second to the amended motion? Or do you accept this?
Yes, I seconded the amended motion.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. The motion carries. Council, we're going to go back to unfinished business. Item B, resolution adopting a living wage for full and part-time city employees and general service contracts, $30,000 and above.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'm sorry to give you a scare. I actually was on my way. I just wasn't fast enough. Tonight, we're here to, the purpose of this staff report is to provide an update on the living wage policy and recommend action for the fiscal year 2013-2014. Just a brief review, April of 2011, you approved the living wage for City of Asheville full, part-time, and contractual employees from the $30,000 to $90,000 level in general services. So just want to remind you, as we're talking about living wage, it only pertains to general services contracts, not to construction, not to procurement. And then at that time, the rate for 11-12 fiscal year was $11.35 an hour without employer-provided health insurance, and $9.85 for if you were being compensated with employer health insurance. The next year, we bumped it up to $200,000. We saw no impact to contracts up to 90, and we looked at the $90,000 to $200,000 level, did not see it, felt comfortable with it, and the living wage remained the same. For this year, we're asking that we increase the living wage rate based on the defined formula, and that we extend the living wage requirements to all general service contracts beginning at the $30,000 level and above, so there would be no cap on the amount of the contracts. The rate that we're coming to you with is considered a universal living wage formula. It is based on the premise of an individual. The cost of the housing should make up no more than 30%. The formula is there. It's set based on 40% of the fair market value for rent, based on housing and urban development rates, and it is divided by 30%, which determines our monthly income, multiplied by 12, divided by the 30%, and then we look at the hourly rate is based on 40 hours a week, 52 weeks a year, and if that person is provided health insurance by the employer, they can be paid $1.50 less. So therefore, we come up with the rate of $11.35 and then $9.85. It is recommended that the City of Asheville adjust the wage rate annually by using a 4-year average of the fair market rent at the 40th percentile so as to mitigate any volatile changes in the fair market rent. If the change in the living wage rate is 3% or greater from the current living wage, the rate would be adjusted. So what's going to happen is we're asking that the city staff would look at this each year, bring it back to you if we feel that the rate would need to be increased based on this formula. We've been working with Just Economics. They feel comfortable with us doing it. And if there's no wage rate, we would not have to come back to you. Based on the recommended formula, the living wage rate for fiscal year 13-14 would be $11.85 an hour without employer-provided health insurance, $10.35 an hour with employer-provided health insurance, representing a 4% increase over the previous 2 years. And I believe it's been longer than that we've raised the rate, the actual rate, because of the economic downturn and the other issues that we had. In terms of application to the general services contracts, as you can see from the information that I've provided in the report, we've seen no significant impact to raising the living wage requirement up to the $200,000 mark. And as we look at contracts above that price, we don't tend to find that there's any restriction. Now, when you get into labor, when you're talking about temporary services, mowing contracts, things that are labor intensive, you will see an impact with that if those contracts go above that. We have not had that in our observance over the last 2 fiscal years. So we don't see there being a significant impact of that. The physical impact, as we look at employers and look at the city of Asheville, it would be nominal for our regular employees. Where we have an issue is with the firefighters. I've explained in there that at the first level, step A, they are not, let me just read it because I'm getting ready to mess it up. The most significant change the City Council would implement is the newly hired firefighters who currently make less than $10.35 an hour during their first 6 months, step A in the step plan, after rookie school. If adopted, the city would move these firefighters to $10.35 an hour, or step B in the step plan, directly after rookie school. If the city had made this change with the last class of 25 newly hired firefighters, the cost impact would have been approximately $7,500 a year in base salary. So this is for a year. In terms of contract costs, like I said, we have not seen any kind of, none of the contracts that we've done above $200,000 have been prohibitive or could not have been budgeted. So there's been no major impact there. We have 4 recommendations. We want to set the living wage at $11.85 an hour without employer-provided health insurance, and $10.35 an hour with employer-provided health insurance. We want to increase the contract threshold for general services subject to living wage from the $30,000 mark to above, so there will be no cap. And then direct staff to continue to monitor the impact of an adjustment with data provided to City Council as part of the quarterly financial report. So you would continue to get information on our living wage contracting each quarter. And then we bring the policy back to City Council for official review as part of the FY 14-15 budget process to look at impact and make recommendations for the adjustment. And I am done. I will answer any questions if you have any.
All right, thank you very much. And Council, any questions, comments, or a motion? Councilman Bothwell.
Yeah, why doesn't this include construction?
Include what?
You said it doesn't include construction contracts?
Because construction and procurement have specific general statutes that govern award.
Oh, okay.
It's not that general services don't particularly have general statutes, but they're more lenient in terms of what we can and cannot do.
Okay, thank you.
That's why we chose that area.
And I would add that that's where other cities have this kind of policy, that's consistent with the policies. That's consistent with their policies as well. There are statutory requirements about accepting low bids and that kind of thing.
Madam Mayor? This has been a real journey for the last couple of years. We started in 11, getting that started, and really kind of measuring what does it do, and taking a good hard look and analyzing what is the fiscal impact here. Because I think that a lot of folks in our community, and definitely a lot of folks on council, agree that people ought to be paid what their work is worth, and ought to be able to live in the community where they work, if they so choose. And so this journey of going just these incremental increases and getting here, I just appreciate the patience of the community as well as the measured analysis of staff, and now we get to complete it. And so I'm really happy to make a motion to set the living wage rate at $11.85 an hour with employer-provided health insurance, and $10.35 an hour with employer-provided health, without $11.85 without, $10.35 with, and increase the contract threshold for general services subject to living wage at $30,000 and above with no cap.
Second.
Any other comments from council?
One more, Mayor. I apologize. One thing I left out. We've seen a few things that we've been able to do here at the council level that have then really been important in the community. I think that when we passed our same-sex domestic partner benefits in the community, that it was a difficult step for council to take, but we've since seen some of our big employers also take that on, recognizing, hey, this is one of the community values of our city, and it's my hope and anticipation is that employers can say, okay, this is a target we can hit too. If Asheville can figure it out, we can figure it out too. So I invite all of our private industry partners and nonprofit partners to get on board, and let's make this a more affordable, livable community.
Other comments? We'll open it up for the community for public comments. Yes. If you could just state your name for the record, and if you're speaking as an individual or a group.
Hi, I'm Vicki Meath. I live in West Asheville, and I'm the Executive Director of Just Economics. Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Council, thank you so much for having me here today and letting me speak in front of you. Once again, I am here to advocate for the living wage policy. I want to recognize that we have several Just Economics and, members and supporters with us tonight, and I hope that you'll indulge us for a few minutes, because this is a big night for us and a big night for economic justice in our community. It's been kind of a long journey. As you know, Just Economics has been advocating for living wages in the public and private sector since our inception. We define a living wage as the minimum amount a worker needs to make in order to meet their basic needs if they were working full-time, basic needs such as food, transportation, healthcare, and housing. We consider a living wage a more just minimum than the minimum wage and a cornerstone to building a healthy economy. We believe it is important for local government to spend our tax dollars on jobs that support a sustainable economy. We also think it is important for the City of Asheville, as an anchor institution, to remain a leader in adopting a more just wage floor, along with over 325 local employers that have committed to paying living wages through our voluntary living wage employer certification program. We know from reports provided by city staff that the financial impact of the living wage policy is minimal, while the impacts on individuals can be substantial. The final stage of this policy will mark the successful end to a campaign that began with the city in 2006, and will put Asheville among over 120 municipalities across the country that have adopted living wage policy for their workers and contractors. I want to thank you for your support of this policy in the past. I realize that this has been a particularly difficult year in terms of the city budget due to a number of policies passed in Raleigh. I want to point out that while the city is faced with additional budget challenges, low-wage workers and low-income people are faced with additional hardships as well. Safety nets for low-income people and their families are being cut. Our state legislature has eliminated the state earned income tax credit, has denied Medicaid expansion, and has drastically reduced the unemployment compensation. These are just a few of the most egregious policies that have been put forth in Raleigh that are impacting low-income people in our community. So it is times like these that we need our local government to stand with workers the most and help create pathways out of poverty. When workers are making a living wage, the need for ever-decreasing public assistance programs is reduced, and more people have money to spend in the local economy. Our working poor and most vulnerable populations need your leadership now. Please continue to support this policies and living wage as a cornerstone to a just and sustainable local economy. Thanks again for having me here tonight.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, well, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Alan, I'll get you in just a second. We'll get you Mr. Schuler and then Mr. Detmore.
Members of council, I'm Lottie Myers, and I'm a member of the original steering committee for the living wage. We were very pleased when City Council immediately adopted the policy, the living wage policy for its staff. It took a little longer to make the same rule for contractors, and I'm very pleased with what you're about to do, I think, tonight, to remove the ceiling for contractors. Especially in a time of increasing income disparity in general, in addition to what Vicki mentioned, what Raleigh is doing to us. So I really appreciate the chance to talk to you again and hope this is the last time on this issue.
All right, thank you. Mr. Schuler?
James Sheeler, West Asheville. Gordon, quick question for you. Did your motion include for the city each year to utilize the Just Economics formula?
The formula was included in the staff report, the accepted formula.
All right, so that is a part of your motion?
Correct.
Yeah. Thank you.
Mr. Ditmore?
I'm Alan Ditmore. My main concern here is the implication that the living wage can be used as a substitute for housing affordability and adequate housing supply. That if you keep going like these high-cost, high-wage cities like San Francisco, that you can that you don't need, that housing doesn't have to be affordable anymore. That you can just keep paying people and they can keep paying the housing, and that this can go on. There's two reasons why it's not a substitute for affordable housing. The first is that somebody on living wage can spend, say, a third of their money on gasoline, which I think comes to around 3,000 gallons of gasoline a year. There isn't that much gasoline. That they're not necessarily going to spend it on housing. They're going to spend it on whatever they want, and gasoline's part of that. And unsustainable spending is part of that. And if you instead of doing that, if you allowed them, simply deregulated housing so that they were allowed to build their own house affordably, that they would have, the incentives would end up being right. They could build their house affordably, they could afford to live in it affordably, and they would not have the potential to buy 3,000 gallons of gasoline a year. So you're expanding the potential for unsustainable spending while not really solving the problem, which is the relationship between wages and housing. The problem isn't that wages are too low. The problem is that housing is too expensive, and housing is too expensive fundamentally because there isn't enough of it, and there isn't enough of it because you're not allowing people to build it. Thank you.
Yes, sir, in the back.
I'm Mark Hebbard. I'm the Living Wage Certification Program Coordinator for Just Economics. So my job is to go out into the business community and sign up employers and get them to pay a living wage to their employees. Just want to say, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Council, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you tonight. We have an opportunity here tonight to change, we've lost the title Beer City USA, and I think there's some folks in our community that might be sort of happy about that. We have a chance to change it to Living Wage City USA, and I think that folks in our community have a chance to take a great sense of pride if that was to happen. We have numerous studies that have shown that living wages do not equal a rise in unemployment. I'll spare you all the details from this 30-page document here that explains that that's not the case. We have some folks that believe in the free market, that paying a living wage will increase the unemployment. It's just that's not true. So the big point of my discussion here is that you are not alone in making this decision. 120 plus municipalities in the United States alone have passed this type of legislation. London has had it in place for 10 years. There's several municipalities that have had it in place for over 10 years. We're certainly not alone. On that note, we have 325 businesses in Asheville and the surrounding areas that have agreed to pay a living wage. And I have some statements from a couple of them that I'll read for you real quick. Danny Keaton, who's the owner of Danny's Dumpsters, who is a contractor with the city, states, "As a local employer and city contractor that is committed to paying a living wage to all my staff, I would encourage the city of Asheville to continue to pay a living wage and extend the city living wage policy to city contracts. Having a living wage policy on city contracts allows me to be able to bid on a contract based on quality of work and our efficiency, not on how low I am willing to pay my employees. It prevents the race to the bottom to see who can pay the least to their staff and win a contract. I'm proud to say that Danny's Dumpsters has a quality staff in a large part because we pay a fair wage. Please support the living wage policy that Just Economics is advocating for. Sarah Landry, the Center of Affairs Coordinator for Lenore Rhine University, writes, "The care for our student extends beyond the classroom to their professional lives as well. We believe that all of our students and all citizens of Asheville deserve a fair and equitable wage to be able to live in our community, raise their children, and grow the local economy. Over 325 businesses in Western North Carolina are living wage certified, including Lenore Rhine University, Asheville. It's important for the city to continue to stand with these businesses as leaders in setting a responsible wage floor."
Thank you.
Thank you.
And if you have more, you can give it to Jamie, and she'll pass it on to City Council.
Thank you very much.
All right, Mr. Sadler, if you could just come forward, state your name for the record.
Good evening, City Council. I'm still Timothy Sadler, and I wanted to take this opportunity to encourage our federal government to follow our local government here by looking towards moving toward a living wage as opposed to a minimum wage, which are two words that mean absolutely nothing to the workers of America, but they do mean what an employer can get away with. Basically, those two words together mean what an employer can possibly get away with. So I wanted to make that point and commend the city for its support of living wage standards. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Anyone else? All right, we'll call for a vote after the last speaker.
Thank you. City Council, I'm Reverend Amy Cantrell, and I just want to say that budgets are moral documents, and y'all have proven that tonight. I believe a budget is a litmus test as to how we treat our citizens and how we care, particularly for our most vulnerable citizens. You all wrestled tonight mightily with that. I was in Raleigh 2 weeks ago, praying and calling our state to do the same and to consider the morality of their actions in terms of our citizens and our most vulnerable citizens. And I particularly want to witness tonight to say to citizens and voters, pay attention to our leaders, pay attention to what our state is doing, and pay attention to your example tonight, because you saved buses, you kept buses running. We care about that. You made sure that affordable housing moves forward in this city. We care about that. And as the mayor said, living wages and camp for kids are equally important, and we agree with you, because budgets are moral documents. And so paying our firefighters who risk their lives running into buildings a living wage matters. And making sure that our parents, and we know many of those parents who send their kids to camp and want their kids in a safe place and want to bring their kids up to grow up to be the firefighters and the mayor of our city, and make sure that they're able to live here affordably and raise families here. So budgets are moral documents, and I want to thank you for your hard wrestling. I want to thank you for your history of standing for workers and paying living wages and asking other businesses to do so. And I thank you for your example. And I am really excited about your vote tonight and the long end of this campaign by doing the right thing by citizens and the most vulnerable. So thank you for your leadership.
All right, Council. We have a motion and a second. All in favor of the stated motion, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. The motion carries unanimously. All right, Council, thank you. Council, we're going to move forward, and the last thing on our printed agenda, I'll turn over to the Vice Mayor to handle.
Thank you, Mayor. The last item on the printed agenda is to determine who will serve in the 2 vacancies on the Civil Service Board. The City Council had an opportunity to interview 3 candidates earlier today. And I think, Jamie, are you ready with tallying? What we can do is just go down the line, and everyone can give 2 names and see if we get 2 that get to 4 votes on our first go-around, which we have a pretty good track record of now. Do you want to start, Mark? You always have to start. I'm sorry.
I will cast my votes for Carolyn Worthington and Elizabeth Franks.
Ditto.
Worthington and Maffa.
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 Okay, it sounds like Worthington and Maffa. The other thing that we need to do is to appoint the chair of this committee. And if you look at your staff report, the remaining members of the committee are Alan Coxey, Virginia Robinson, and Marvin Rosen. And I know that Mark serves as liaison to this committee, and maybe you might want to say a few words about the chairmanship.
Well, council has not taken applications or interviewed folks for the chairmanship role, so, and that's perhaps an oversight as we approach this meeting. I kind of sorted that out in my mind earlier today, but it is council's duty to appoint the chair. Most of our boards and commissions actually elect or appoint their own chair, so this is kind of a one-off unusual thing. At any rate, I would nominate Marv Rosen to be the chair of the board, and I suspect that if he's unwilling, he would let us know before next month, and we would change it. So.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a few seconds for that. Okay. Any more discussion? Any questions? No? All right. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we have succeeded in that small task.
All right, Councilor, I only have one sheet from a member of the community wishing to address council. Mrs. Sadler, you're welcome to talk about anything that's not on our printed agenda this evening.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Mayor. My name is Timothy Sadler, and I am here before you to basically state that the public's trust has been betrayed by our chief of police, and I am here to encourage him to do the right thing and resign tomorrow to just end this drama. It's such an important position in the community, and clearly the public's trust has been betrayed, and I wanted to say that, and also wanted to commend Maggie Ullman for all of her great work in the Office of Sustainability. I know that the city just received an award out in Nevada, was it Las Vegas, for our accomplishments related to sustainability, and I know that Maggie has been incredibly instrumental in helping us get to that. So, thank you.
Thank you. All right, that's all that I have listed. Any other member of the community wishing to address council this evening? All right, seeing none, we continue our closed session. Council, any comments or any announcements that you want to make? Councilman Smith?
Just in acknowledging the fact that that story did break today, I was wondering if the manager might take a moment to kind of review what process is underway so folks can just be aware.
Yes, we received a formal complaint from Lieutenant Wilkie. He reported that today, and what we have to add to what he released today is he has received a formal response from the city manager, and that was sent to him on Friday last. He also received that via email notifying him on that same date that we would be doing an administrative investigation into the internal matters of the police departments, as he alleges in his complaint. We expect that to take 30 to 45 days, and we will do the full extent of review that we do for employee grievances of this matter, and we take all of this very seriously, and there will be no aspect of this that will not be looked at and thoroughly reviewed.
Thanks, Gary. And I would urge everyone in the community to withhold judgment until all the facts are laid out. That's what I intend to do.
I think that might be a little misleading. I don't believe that the findings of the report will be made public. Mr. Jackson, if you could just talk about that. Is that a personnel issue, or is that going to be something
Did
that...
I say the findings of my report will be made public?
You didn't say, and Councilman Smith...
That I may have implied that,
You implied that it will be public, and that's just not the case. And so you might want to let everyone know that what happens when you finish your administrative review.
Administrative review of an employee grievance involves taking the evidence that's provided by the employee, interviewing the employee, making sure that we know that story as they provide it to us, verifying the factual nature of that, talking to the parties who are the subject of the complaint, and then verifying to the extent possible through other records. And the complaints are typically about the administration, proper administration of policies and procedures. Complaints typically come from employees about how management performs their jobs, department management, and so city management's role is to look at those concerns to see if policies were violated, if procedures were not followed, and if the treatment of the employee was fair and consistent with our high expectations and standards. At the end of that review, the employee who filed the complaint does get a response, and they're either the findings are sustained and appropriate action is taken to correct the situation. We hear the remedies suggested to us by the employees and the concerns that they raise, tie those together, and determine if they're on the right track, and take those corrective actions if they are on the right track. And if they're not, they'll get a full explanation from us.
All right, so I just wanted to be clear so that the public won't look to see what happened at the 30 to 45 days, a written report from the city manager presented at a city council meeting, because it's not going to happen. And I think it needed to be stated that. I also think it's important to state that if anything was inappropriately handled, there are two investigations, the one that Mr. Jackson's looking at with the process of internal staff-to-staff efforts. But if there's something wrong with anything that was stated in the investigation, the DA has a process as well. And so that's ongoing, and that involves the SBI, not the City of Asheville nor City Council. And so I think that's important to point out, and that's a separate process that carries out through the judicial system and not here. And I think it's important to point out, the City of Asheville has over 200 individuals who are sworn to defend this city, the state of North Carolina, and the Constitution, inconsistent therewith. And I don't like the blanket statements that have been presented over the entire department. And no, I haven't lost my trust in the department. I think it's important to point out that whatever's happening with Lieutenant Wilkie, I think it's going to get the fair light of day. I'm hoping that the two administrative senior level staff members that you have put forward to investigate every sentence of the 10 pages that have been presented will actually get seen, and that way it will get reviewed and the trust can be restored. But I don't think it's fair for everyone to cast a shadow over our police department, implicating everyone in the department, because it's not fair to the men and women who want to protect and serve our community. We have some great men and women who serve, and I think this process is going to be carried out, and we're going to make sure as a council that we get updates on making sure the process is moving forward and nothing's pushed under the table. But we have no say-so over what the district attorney does. That's not our role. It's not our job. What he chooses to do, he and the SBI, we cannot control that process. And so I think that's important to point out. So what happened on that night in question, I wasn't there. Only the DA can get to the bottom of it, and it's not, we cannot speak to that issue with authority or with assurance because we were not there. And I'm just going to believe that Mr. Moore would do what he needs to do with that concerning that issue. With that being said, council, we already have a motion to go into closed session. We already continued it, so we're going to go back into closed session. We will not have any announcements at the end of closed session. We will adjourn from closed session.
Thanks for clarifying that.
Yeah.